Very good, or?
It just pops out, like those pots. Yeah, I just use those black pots.
Right, oh yeah, I use those a lot too.
My green peppers are this tall, and the bushes, I mean, got
I
green
have
peppers.
potatoes this.
Yeah, I eat grilled potatoes this year.
All right, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. If you could please rise for the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
To approval of the agenda. Any opposed? Motion to approve the agenda?
Moved, I suppose.
Yep. We're just asking if there's any opposed, so we're good. Approved. There's no minutes for approval. We'll move into old business item number 1, which is Foster Storage Condominium Special Land Use. There is a public hearing scheduled for this agenda item at 7:30 tonight. So at this time, if maybe Zach, if we do like a condensed version of the plan
yes.
review for the PC here.
Are you gonna do a call to the public before this? You gotta listen to it.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Scott.
Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead and call the public. We'll do that
Anybody else
first.
wanna go first?
Thank you.
I gotta say something. I gotta be, anyways, Scott Dietrich, White Lake Road. After the meeting last week with the sight line, last month or whatever, sight lines, it was getting frustrating, I know, frustrating for you guys. I know you don't wanna, it's hard, you don't wanna, you got people on both sides. But the 70-foot setback is a good idea. And I think the footprint of the house that's existing, I think Steve was bringing that up, is good. Now, you can allow the people to go closer to 70 feet, no closer than that, but they should take into consideration of their neighbors on the first floor only. Second floor, because if you're up on a different grade, the next house, you got different sight lines. But I don't think it's going to be that difficult to get a sight line thing go through. But the people bought the house, and the existing house is where the sight lines are set. And these are houses that are in right now that are established, and the people that are living there are established already on either side. So I think it'd be easy. I like a 70-foot setback, fine, but I also like the fact that you guys would consider, and I think Steve brought up too, is if the house is already there, let them build it there. But if they want to go second story or go out towards lake, or any way they go, if they're competing with their neighbor's sightline, then there could be an issue. But putting that house back in the same place, closer than 70 feet, it was there before, and I can't see any reason why we shouldn't try to allow that. I mean, I like to try to conform, but like I said, the house was there, and then, there's no other problem. I think it'd be a good idea to go that route. And the people should understand, hey, you bought that house, and that's where it was. And you've got to remember, your neighbors are there, and their sight lines are their sight lines. And, I think they got to respect that. You want to work for them as much as possible, but they still got to respect the neighbor's sight lines, to a certain point, just without getting ridiculous. I can understand that. So, all right, guys, I hope you had a good Memorial weekend.
Thanks, Scott. Any other public comment?
Is this for general comments?
Yes.
Okay. All right, stop me when and if I go over. Okay, Jeanette Ropetta, on Fuller Drive. I also represent Tyrone Township Watch, which is a watchdog type group. Okay, this is a general comment. I subscribe to the township email updates. I count on them to keep me notified what's going on. Yesterday around 4:30, I received the agenda for tonight's meeting via email. I promptly shared it with neighbors, friends, and in many social media groups. The potential reach is several hundred, maybe even thousands. I don't know how far it goes up, but just one person being uninformed with outdated materials is reason enough to bring up this issue. Today I wanted to review the document before tonight's meetings. None of my links worked that I had shared this document. So I usually download the copy to my desktop. I decided to work from my phone. I went straight to the township's website. There it was. I noticed that the document was different. It had more pages. So this is just since yesterday. So this means what I shared with many township residents was now outdated information. But to make matters worse, there was no way of telling what had been changed because the website and not even the document acknowledged that there had been any changes. So I quickly contacted the clerk. She acknowledged that yes, the document's now different from what was emailed and different from what I and many others had maybe even shared and read. So I asked the clerk if she could update the document online with text at the beginning to identify the changes. I asked if she could also immediately email all the subscribers and notify them that the document she linked to yesterday was no longer valid. Would anyone like to guess at what her response was? Zilch. Zero. Nothing. And you know what? This isn't the first time. You remember the last time, Ross, that this happened? Just recently, with just the Planning Commission this year. This happens with the board many times. So anyway, Rich, I think you should be highly concerned about this. If you're the chair, an agenda distributed to the public, published on the township's website, and then changed with no acknowledgement of those changes, that's just not good. And as you recall, this is not the first time it said that it's happened. So it comes down to the procedures and processes and stuff. There's no rhyme or reason for what gets published out there. There needs to be transparency and it needs to show what's been changed. I don't know if you guys, when you looked at the document, if you know if you have the latest one or not, but it was changed today. How much time do I have?
You have another minute.
A minute? Okay. Second topic, it bears repeating that the residents have been told since February of 2021, 16 months, that we residents would be needed to help with the master plan. Okay, I keep drumming this every time, but we've offered individually as groups to help fit in any way you see fit. The problem seems to me that you guys don't see any way to fit us in to help. We've all been allowed to do, what we've been allowed to do is speak up during public comment time. Sometimes our comments are acknowledged, but more often than not, the standard, thank you for your comment. We're willing to do work that would otherwise cost taxpayers additional money. We've been willing to work with you guys and help lighten your load and to do some of the heavy work. And you know, that there's people, let me just skip here, but we've got professionals in our community that are project managers, that are managers, that are familiar with surveys, that do this kind of work on their own, that want to help, that want to get involved. But we've been told, no, there's a committee. Who gets to be on the committee? Just you guys. We've got a resident that took the planning commission through a local university. He's not been asked to help. And I don't know, we've been at, like I said, 16 months we've been told, we're going to need your help, we're going to need your help. Why aren't we allowed to help? And here we are, where's the survey? What are the dates for the visioning sessions? Maybe that's going to come up, but I mean, this is June of 2022, and we still don't know this information. So I know it's an old cry that I've been trying to get your attention with. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's right that you're excluding residents that want to help. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
I just want to add to hers real quick. I just want to question, is there any reason why we can't get these little groups started up where we can just get together and go over the old master plan together? And we can start jotting down questions while you guys are getting the preliminary stuff going? You understand what I'm saying? We can get our groups together, sit down, take the old master plan, and we speed the process up by going through and having questions ahead of time. So if you could get us involved in that might be an idea.
We will do an update tonight on the master plan.
All right.
Any other comments? Anyone online? Okay. Thanks again, Scott, for reminding me. I missed the call. Look on the agenda. I appreciate it. So we'll move to old business item number 1. Zach, want to do just maybe a brief one for the planning commission to remind?
So, refresher, it's for special land use and combined preliminary and final site plan for a mini warehouse facility. This is a bit unusual from most of them because it's going to be condominium ownership, so it won't be rental. The only wrinkle with that is it requires condominium documents and an association just as if it were a whole site plan with a bunch of houses on there. Calls for 115 individual units. The property is 10 acres in size. If you include the right-of-way, the minimum is 3 acres. It's in the PCI, Planned Commercial Industrial District, where that use is a special land use. And the future land use map also calls for planned commercial industrial up and down that side of the highway. We've talked about natural resources before. There's big topography on there. There are hydric soils, but no wetlands. I'm on the top of page 6 right now. Variances were granted for several of the setbacks. At previous meetings, the Planning Commission determined that the access drives followed underneath the exemption that allows drives to access rear yards and garages. My comment is just to verify for staff that the variances are still good. There's generally a time limit on how long they're good, with ways to extend them or to redo them, and they were necessary for this. Access and circulation, the things that we note is it will require driveway approval from Livingston County Road Commission. Fire inspector should look at it and give their approval. There are the turning radiuses for the trucks on there. One thing that we didn't see on the site plan was security gate details, including first responder access. So it's usually something like a Knox box goes on front, which is a secure box that the firefighters or whoever can open to get in, so they don't have to ram the fence down. Relatively easy thing that can be checked administratively. The off-street parking and loading has been revised from what we saw last time. For essential services, we've discussed those. The only thing that we noted from our side is that the location of electrical service within the site isn't shown, so it's shown where it comes in from the pole to the first building, but then it's not shown how it gets from that building to all the others. For landscaping and screening, there's a lot of landscaping going in. One thing for this body to consider, you've touched on it briefly, but before you make your final recommendation to the Township Board, is whether or not you want to consider more landscaping on the side towards Old US 23, primarily because it's going to be elevated up and so more visible. And irrigation system details should be added to the site plan. For lighting, the details on there are consistent with what your zoning ordinance requires. The only note that we have is that they should be added onto the building, just like the little box here is where the light fixtures go. They are shown on the site plan, but not on the buildings themselves. The sign location is out of the clear vision zone. The note on the site plan says it'll be a separate permit, so at that time, staff can check and make sure the height and the area and the setback from the road right of way are all consistent. For mini warehouse, just a couple of comments we have is that a note similar to one in the use statement that there will be no outside parking, as all belongings must be inside the owner's unit, should be added to the site plan. We've talked about the exterior appearance. We've noted that more consistent with other commercial buildings would have some banding or masonry surface. The applicant has described why that's very difficult to do with this structure. The resident manager, they said they're not going to have one. Our comments are to add that note to the site plan. And circulation is good. And let's see. That's my quick version. Thank you.
Thanks, Zach.
How many units was that?
I hope my report wasn't that long.
How many units are on there?
115. Plus there's kind of the utility thing on the end of the top right building.
I don't have the paperwork in front of me for that.
commissioners have questions on any items right now before.
Marge. I see her.
The applicant is here too, if you want him to address.
Yeah.
As a reminder for folks in the audience, the planning commission makes a recommendation on the site plans and special land uses to the township board, who makes the final decision.
Except some have to be counted.
That's zoning amendments.
Oh, sorry.
Pages you guys want to see on the red, or you guys? Paper.
So, this is the latest site plan, and then this is your updated review on it. It seems like some of these questions you had we had last time.
Yeah, I'm bringing them up. Like, I didn't talk about the appearance so much, but I just kind of wanted to remind folks that your ordinance says commercial buildings should kind of look like other commercial buildings. And this is a weird fellow because there aren't a lot of commercial buildings right near it. So I didn't want to hit it hard, but because it is part of your zoning ordinance, I want to remind you about those things.
But a couple of the items like the knockbox and the irrigation, seems like those are consistent.
Yep.
Are we just, like, are you working on the plan for that? I mean, do you agree that we're gonna have
Absolutely, I mean,
irrigation?
those comments will be added into the site plan, so
Okay.
those aren't
Yeah.
neglected at this point in time at all. It was just kind of moved to the next, that's how I want to address this, I think, was move to this level. We have to have a final that's gonna. come in
Okay,
that's
so
gonna address
that was
these.
also what I was gonna ask. It seems like your review is based on preliminary and final.
Mhm.
And I think and that was the original goal, right? Do them all both at once? And the last
Well,
meeting, we kind of talked
But
about.
engineering still has to be, we've got to get final engineering through too.
Yes,
So
okay.
that's where these comments now we can put into the. we'll
Yeah,
put into
okay,
the
so
site
we're only
plan.
looking for preliminary for now. Yeah, it seems like the last comments are the details,
Yeah.
you know, not the overarching.
And now we have,
plan.
again, a lot of what was discussed, we now have those in writing, which we just received. I mean, we received them on Monday,
Yep.
I think. So these, basically, so we'll put those into the site plan, all those, final changes in, so you'll have what's been recommended here.
And what I'll say is, though, it looks like a long list. There's nothing that's really would cause heartburn from the planning and zoning side. A lot of them are small details that,
Yeah.
and I missed that this was just going to be preliminary with final later. A lot of these, even if this were to be final, they could be added to the site plan that gets to the township board, or even many of them could be approved with the condition that staff reviews revised version. Like the notes on there, you have a spot, there's lots of white space where they can be added.
I guess in the comment on the trees, there is a lot of trees on the landscaping plan. Maybe there could be some of those from the backside moved up closer to the front. I don't know if there's a reason,
Well, the challenge is gonna be, John, is that, we put them up front, we really don't change a whole lot because of that elevation. So
Yeah.
it becomes, you gotta let them grow, they're gonna have to grow in some.
Yeah.
We're gonna have that one corner that's gonna be higher in elevation than on the southeast corner. So that's why that's gonna have some higher elevation to it. But really, it's difficult to impact that at all, just throwing more trees.
there's a pond. If you go to the next, you can see the pond there. You can see the pipes. There's a pond there.
Could we have speakers at the podium so people on Zoom and YouTube can see who's speaking, please?
you know, it's always those first couple of years. It takes some of that growth that's gotta come in, but once it really starts to pull in, it'll fill in quite a bit. And, you know, you're gonna have a lot of coverage on that property.
Fencing portion of this last time, we talked about fence. Good on that. You guys, any questions, Kurt? Anything before the?
No,
A few minutes before the hearing, so. Yeah, and then this add the parking location there. That's good. Guess I didn't see them, but they're small lines. They put it on the
Yeah.
tracks.
Yeah. They got a fire truck to move around there.
Ross, did you know if we received any written communication?
No written communication, no.
Okay. Just one question, is that, I know Zach mentioned, electrical gonna be underground, that the.
Yes.
And there's one question that came to mind, do you have a general indication if these are gonna be filled right away? I don't know, it's really early still.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of interest in them, I can tell you that, but you know, our goal is to go into phases, right? So we'll put in a phased approach to, you know, make sure that we're gathering the right mix, as opposed to trying to throw the whole thing out there and sit. So we're gonna go into phases to build out. I think it's a good indication. promoting it. So,
Yeah.
till this point, we haven't done much promotion at all.
Okay, all right. Thanks.
Till 7:30 exactly and start, just in case someone comes right at 7:30.
Old business, but that's just supposed to be public hearing, right? But just number one is public hearing, not number two.
Probably doing that next. We come back to the meeting. Well, no, they'll probably come back to this after the public hearing. We'll make this-
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to suspend the meeting and move to the public hearing.
So moved.
Alrighty. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
This is
Okay. 1 minute. Start the public hearing.
It does seem to pass, but you did have a public hearing.
Oh, yeah.
I realize the public hearing has its own agenda, but I'm thinking that should be in there.
Okay, so we're gonna move to the public hearing. I'm gonna read the notice that was posted in the newspaper. The notice is hereby given, the Tyrone Township Planning Commission will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, June 14th, 2022, beginning at 7:30 PM at Tyrone Township Hall. The purpose for the public hearing is to receive public comments regarding the following proposed special land use permit. A request by Brendan and Stephanie Foster for a proposed special land use to build a new mini warehouse facility, parcel number 470432200014, zone PCI, planned commercial industrial. The parcel is located at the southwest corner of Fawcett Road and Old US 23, regulated by zoning ordinance number 36, Article 22, special land use permits, and Article 23, site plan review and impact assessment. So we will now open the public hearing, and the review of the application, Zach did go over a very quick review of it for the planning commission, so at this time, maybe, I did see there's a few folks that joined Zach, so if you wouldn't mind going through it again, it would help, I believe.
All right. So I guess clarify that this is just preliminary site plan and special land use, correct? Or are we doing combined still?
Preliminary, I thought you
My understanding initially was combined
Right.
to get it through at the same time. I mean, it's rare that we do a special land use as preliminary for something like this unless it's a PUD. I mean, do you have, it's up to you as the applicant.
Well, we want to combine, we got to move this.
Yeah, that's
We're in-
what you were saying from the beginning.
Yeah.
That's what we,
All right, so to clarify then, it is a special land use and combined preliminary and final site plan for a mini warehouse facility. Will be owned by individual folks, each unit as part of a condominium association, 115 individual units. It is a special land use in that zoning district. It meets the developmental standards or received variances for setbacks. And, let's see the highlights. There are a number of smaller issues to be tended to. And again, as we said before the public hearing, either that can be addressed in revisions to the site plan that go to the township board or administratively approval with conditions. That's my super quick version.
Yeah, it seems to me like we have seen this multiple times, and everything that you've mentioned certainly seems like Zach could handle it administratively.
Yeah.
Ross.
Ross, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Ross, Zach. It's been a long day. Would you agree with that, Ross?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, if there's conditions, typically what I'll do, if it is a conditional approval, is I'll give it a review, I'll verify that everything's been completed to what I can see, but I'll also send it to the subcommittee for verification as well.
Yeah, so we just need to go through these, with the remainder of the comments, and just, these ones we were gonna require, or these ones, you know, and then you make sure they do it.
I'll make sure, and then I'll send it to the subcommittee for double, triple verification.
What I do want to say is the list on the very back is the updated one. There were a couple that had been there for previously back in the report that I hadn't fully removed because I was so focused on getting this list back here, right? So the back list is the one to look at, not the one throughout.
This is what we're talking about here.
Yep.
13.
And then, for the public, this is the, I'll review this, go here to the site plan, shows it very well here. And the overhead, you can see what this comprises of. Yeah, and then, right now, if the applicant, if you could just give a summary of the application. I know you have done this multiple times, but for the public hearing purposes, if you could, if you wouldn't mind, would you step to the podium?
Sure.
For this? Great.
Brendan Foster, developer of the project. So as we discussed, as we kind of laid out, 115 units in the multiple buildings that are on the 10 acres site. It is a condo association. So each individual purchaser will own the actual unit itself, which will fall into a condominium association, which will be managed by the association. So all grounds maintenance, all the other items that are going to be handled will be handled by the association itself. This is a very aesthetically pleasing. We've got fencing around the facility. It will be gated community so that it will only allow via a code to go into your facility. This is not a gathering facility. This is a storage location. You're going to actually have either RVs, boats, classic cars, or you may have some people who have storage of other goods in their possession there. So all in all, it's not a really a 24-hour round-the-clock type of facility. Most customers, most people using the units would probably come in during the midday or something to take care of whatever they need to take care of, some of the weekends, and then be able to move on. Besides that, it's a growing popular concept, and it gives a lot of opportunity for residents in this area, especially lake residents, RVs, to kind of get them out of yards, get them out of storage areas, and actually inside buildings, which actually cuts down on a lot of the actual vehicles that are placed around the area. So it's just it's an up and coming type of project. More and more places are doing these types of projects because of people's things they've accumulated and they want to go ahead and put into storage units. So I guess that's in a nutshell, that's the concept and that's the project.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so as part of that was the summary of the application there, and then, overall, I think. No, I was gonna follow the agenda there, go to the public comments and move to that. So the next part of the public hearing we'll move to is to receive public comments regarding this application. And as a reminder for the public, please direct your questions and comments to the Planning Commission. And we may not be able to answer them during your public comment, because then it reduces the time for that public comment. But what we will do is then try to summarize at the end to address those questions that may come up. So if when you are bringing up public comments, please come to the podium if you're able. That way everyone can hear you well. So, all right, at this time we can go to receive public comments. Yeah, I see 2 hands over there, so whoever would like to go first.
Hi, I live on one of the properties very nearby, just across the street. And so I have concerns about things like, I did read through the draft owners association thing, and so maybe I missed it, and I know it had been brought up by you guys at the very beginning, but I am concerned about businesses being run out of there. I don't know if there's anything to keep that from happening. I could easily see a mechanic running something out of there, so that's a concern of mine. I know these aren't supposed to be occupied like a residence 24/7, but there's going to be bathrooms, there's going to be satellite dishes allowed to be put up, TV antennas, Wi-Fi. I'm just wondering again, what's going to keep, what sort of things can the township do to keep that from happening? I understand there's going to be a homeowners association or condo owners association, but does that mean there's a presence on site that's going around and making sure that none of the owners are, or that all the owners are complying with the rules? And the other thing is while I'm sure every intention is being made to be a good neighbor with this planning, once everything is sold, then we have all these other owners now that need to be good neighbors, and I just have very little faith that may or may not happen. So those are my main concerns, is just making sure that, whatever is going in there is what's going to happen and not things are going to go, skew or anything like that. Because at the end of the day, we have to live there. Nobody else is living around there. So those are my concerns.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Would you mind stating your name for the record?
Oh, sure. Angela?
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Scott.
All right, Scott Dietrich, White Lake Road. I submitted some stuff to, I think Jeanette sent it to you guys. I sent some stuff to her, she sent some stuff. I hope you guys enter it in the record before the end of the meeting. I foresee a lot of problems here. I mean, it's, Steve, I know Steve, I've known his family for a long time. They run storage units. These aren't storage units. I mean, they're gonna be whatever these people want to make them. An association that runs their own rules. I live on the lake, and we don't even have an association. I'm trying to get one there for years on my little private lake. But you know the difference between an association and township. There's 2 separate entities. And you're gonna have headaches. And I don't think we need to be babysitting it. I don't like 115 owners. I think they should be leased or rented. I think, we're gonna be drug into too much legal stuff over there. Police and everything. I don't think the heat, I don't think the bathrooms in these things is ridiculous. Separate bathroom facilities. I think you're just opening up a can of worms. You're gonna have people just, my wife instead of right, come here, they're just gonna move their asses in. Associations, it's gonna be a fight, and you gotta go to court and move them out. I mean, it's just, why do we want that headache? I mean, the gentleman's, if he wants to run the business, he can own it and lease them out, let him babysit, and we go after one person, not all of them. Do we want that headache? I don't think we do. I'm not saying I'm against the storage unit facility, no. I just think he's way gonna use this stuff. Man cave, that's what was offered at the last meeting, we could use it for man caves, because they don't want to party on the lake, because they might interfere with their neighbors over there, so they're gonna go over her neighbor, these two neighbors, and interfere, they're gonna have to listen to all that noise. Gasoline, I submitted a whole bunch of stuff, gasoline. You know there's always gonna be some dummy who's gonna put gas cans in there. You got a leaky motorhome or leaky boat in there, you got a furnace in there. These things are on top of each other, you're gonna have a fire. And you deal with it on the news every day. I mean, there's just too many, I mean, you guys are gonna have some really serious restrictions. And I think it's a bad idea for having 115 owners. I really do. And I don't think it's this township, we have enough trouble right now getting stuff that we get done without being in court babysitting that place. We just need one owner. And like I said, I submitted a whole bunch of things, and I hope you guys enter into the meeting.
Thank you, Scott. All right, go ahead. Did you, she had her hand up first. So. Yeah. Go ahead. That's right. Order.
Jeanette Rapetta, Fuller Drive. So Scott brings up some good points about, what are going to be the restrictions. We know, and I forget her name, someone else brought up, who's going to police this. We should all know that it will be the neighbors that will be policing it, right? We don't have the manpower to do that. We, the neighbors, have to watch, and we have to call in complaints. That's the only way that someone can be held to account. Now, I know this from personal experience, and also we've had Ross and others stand up and say, if there's a problem, you guys have to be the ones who look at your neighbors, see what they're doing, spy on them, come in and tell us. It's not enough to just tell us, you have to write a formal complaint. They do not have the power to police this stuff. So, if I'm wrong, I really hope that this will be the exception where you'll actually respond to my comment. But if I'm right, and I suspect I am, that nothing has changed in the last couple months, we, the people, are the ones that have to police this. It will not get done by the township. So.
Okay. Thanks. That's it.
Hi, Kirk Kennedy, we moved in across the street, directly across the street in 72. I don't live there anymore, I'm not in the township, but my mom still lives there, 90 years old, and living by herself. Her concern is how much partying will be going on in there. My concern from an aesthetic standpoint is we get to look at the back side of the 20 garages, and I don't care how much landscaping you put there, it's been 20 years before it looks like anything. My other concern is lighting, because there's going to be 24/7 lighting, so you'll have a lot of light pollution up there. And if what they've done now is any indication of what it's going to look like, there's been a tree down for 8-9 months just laying in the one with maybe the new driveway. The other driveways had trash on it for over a year. And the one thing I really don't understand is why it needs to have the entrance on Fawcett Road. If you pull a fifth wheel out of there with a 30-foot truck, we've lived in that place long enough to know everybody flies over that hill at 50 miles an hour. That's an accident waiting to happen at that entrance right there. The further away down the road it can be, or off of Old 23, would make a lot more sense if this has to go forward. Thank you.
Thanks for the comment. Any other public? Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
I lived directly across the street. Now, when they first started, they told me it was storage units. I thought, okay. Then the next thing I find out, there's a toilet and a sink. So I came back and it in because they might want to work on their properties and roads. So I thought, well, that makes sense. And then I read in the paper that they can put couches and TVs in. Now, that is not a storage. And my understanding was if you have commercial property, you cannot stay on it. It looks to me, and they're encouraging people to come. And they call it an AMKP or a garage condominium. Well, that is not a storage unit. And you know there's going to be drinking, there's going to be drugs when you have these parties. So, plus, that between my driveway and the stop sign is the entrance. And when I pull out of my drive, they fly over that hill. And I can hardly, and they're right on my bumper. So if I have to stop at that entrance, I could be hit by these people that fly over. Because they don't drive slow on Boston Road. So that's
Thank you. Any other public comments at this time? Yeah, sir.
I'm Steve Hasbrook, I live on Fawcett Road, west of the site, 2 miles. I don't think the architectural review has been properly handled on that. If we're still talking about just plain steel sided buildings, have you guys had an architectural committee meeting on this?
No,
It's required.
we have reviewed what they've submitted.
Are you going to review it? It's supposed to be done before you hold this kind of a final site plan review.
We can speak to that at the end of the public comment.
I personally think that needs to be addressed. Should have been already dealt with. You know, this gentleman's still trying to get this built, and it hasn't been worked out that these buildings are going to look any different than what they are. You know, the Kennedys, you know, if I lived where they do, you'd really be here at this point. You know, they need to have a different facade on the backside, on every perimeter of this whole site. It needs to be made to look better than what's being planned. The setback variances is a joke. There's no way the ZBA should have granted any setback variances to the site. It's strictly so you can put more units on the 10 acres, which is not a reasonable variance request. Of course, that's Steve's input, but wetlands, there's definitely wetlands along the edge of Old 23, and everybody seems to just be ignoring that fact. It's contiguous to the stream, and they could even be regulated wetlands. From what I'm looking at with the way the road or the access trails or whatever you want to refer to the roadway, you know, once you get a foot or two of snow on that site, where are they gonna, what are you gonna do with the snow that's gotta have to be pushed out of the way somewhere? There's relatively no place to put it with the way the fencing is right up to the edge of the driveways. So you might want to consider having at least a plan how they're going to deal with it. So I guess that's my comments, and I expect something to happen with the facades. You know, you can't just not have the meeting. You know, if it's all you find, or, you know, it specifically says needs to be at least 3 members, and either your planner or some other architectural expert. Okay?
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment at this time? Anybody on Zoom? I don't see anyone. All right, move
to the planning commission and planner comments. So, any comments from commissioners? Public hearing?
I got a couple. When you build the initial buildings out there, you're putting all 115 units up at once?
Yeah.
Okay, how many are you planning on putting up at once?
We'll probably begin with roughly 30 units, that would be the first phase.
Okay. So, but the perimeter of the building will be, the fencing and all that stuff will be up. You just won't have all of the buildings, is that correct?
Well, we have to be careful about that. I don't know exactly if we're able to put all the fencing in prior to having, we will do the grading, we'll get, all of that brought down and retaining walls and things. I just have to, I can't speak to that right now as to say, how we'll, bring those fencing in, because we want to make sure that they don't have to come down again for any reason.
Because my concern with this is, I would hate to see a half-finished project out there. We put up 30 and then we don't get any more sales for a while, or for 3 or 4 years. So I guess my question is, should there be an end time to when the remaining ones need to be built, or how the place is finished off? Just my own comments. I guess one of the other questions I have too is, how many parties could own one unit? So could me and my 6 brothers and 2 sisters buy one unit?
Well, again, legally, I don't know the answer to that. I guess you could establish an LLC, or you could establish some type of corporation that, if a trust or something like that, you would be able to purchase it for that trust or that LLC.
Okay.
So it would be an investment, it would be an ownership investment. So yes, I think technically that could potentially happen.
So a business could purchase one of those units if they wanted to. In essence, the boat place down here, if they wanted to store some of their boats up there, they could purchase.
They could purchase it, but they cannot run a storefront out of, they cannot run
Right.
a business out of the actual unit is not allowed for a business. So they could use it as a storage, but not a storefront. No one can come there, no one can, it's just for their storage.
Okay, so that brings up another question then too. If I'm an owner and I move to Florida, but I want to keep the unit, can I sublet it?
You can lease it, yes, you can. You'll be responsible for that.
I'm responsible, but I can sublet it to my brother-in-law and his 4 kids or whatever, and they could use it to store.
Just as you could rent your home out.
Right.
Yes.
Let's see. We don't have a real provision in there. In essence, each unit is responsible for their own upkeep as far as trash, garbage, and stuff like that, correct?
There's no garbage on site, so we're not, the association's not gonna manage dumpsters or any of that. So
Okay.
the trash that you bring in, the trash that you accumulate has to come out of the unit and the confines of the association. When, every time you go in, you're taking, that has to come out. So there will be no garbage dumpster storage units for any trash.
So everybody's responsible for their own area.
Everyone is responsible for their own trash to come out.
What about parking in the area just along, okay, I parked my car there because I'm taking my RV out and I can't get it in, I can't replace what I can't put my car in the garage, so I leave my car. How long can a car stay out there?
12 hours.
12 hours.
12 hours is the
Yeah,
limit.
it's in the bylaws. Read
Yeah.
the bylaws. It states.
Okay. And I don't know, did we address fire suppression with this?
No, because of the building sizes and there's not the suppressions necessary.
Okay. So there's no way to really, well, let me put it this way. If one building catches fire, do we have firewalls between?
We have walls between them, yes. They're not full firewalls between them, but they are walls between them. However, there can be people who own 2 or 3 units, so they may not have any walls between the 2 units. And so they would not have those walls. So some buildings may not have as many walls as buildings.
Well, yeah, that would be another question. If I bought 3 units together, I could take down the interior walls.
Correct. Those can be your units, right.
So I could make one big unit out of 3.
Yes, you can.
Does that give me 3 votes in the,
Yes, you'd have
So-
3 units. Those are three condo units.
okay, I guess my biggest concern is still the fact that we could end up with a situation where we have a half-finished building site, and something goes, the market goes south here, which it's been going here the past few weeks, and people don't buy any more condos to store their stuff in, and what happens with it.
Was that a question to me?
I guess it's just a general question, yeah.
It's like, I guess, Kurt, in any investment that you make, and you go into any development, right, there is the possibility that, you would have a slower period of time, that, sales would not be as robust as other times, right? We may find that it takes off and we can't stop the train because it's going so fast, people want to get on. They want to buy this. We don't know, right? So, I understand your comment, but the only thing I can address is to say that, again, it's like any development, right? You go in with the best intention that you're going to develop this project and get this up and operating in a timely fashion. Because, time is money. And we've got to get them, get people in, get them sold, and get the process completed.
Well, I won't use up everybody else's
No,
time here.
thanks. Bill or Steve, John, any other comments? Zach, do you have anything?
Yep.
Um,
I'll try to address some of the questions that were raised. If I miss any that you want answered, let me know. I'll try to do my best to scribble it down quickly. My understanding is the location of the driveway was dictated by the Livingston County Road Commission, so there's not a lot of wiggle room on there. They will generally tell you this is where you can put it and here's where you can't put it. My understanding is the Livingston County Road Commission, like most road commissions, want driveway access on the least high volume road if it's an intersection. The condominium element of this, it's just an ownership system. So you can have what we typically call subdivision is now a condominium for weird state enabling purposes. And so people own their unit, whether or not it's a house, a lot for a house, an apartment, or a storage space. And it's a state way of how you can jointly care for shared assets like driveways and exterior building walls and ceilings and elevators and streets and whatnot. Let's see. The reference to enforcement, the enforcement is always very difficult to do, and it is a bit mixed case of whether or not it's easier to have an association or not. Often it can be easier on the local unit of government because the association tends to have much stricter rules and more people looking at it immediately that will police it on their own. So for example, a lot of homeowners associations say you can't put up a political yard sign before this date and you have to take it down on this date and you only get so many signs. That's not something the township can do because of the Constitution and the amendments and those types of limitations, but the association can do it because it's a contract you've entered into, and it typically happens. So the benefit is there will be 114 extra sets of eyeballs out there looking to see what's going on, and they generally want it to be kept in good condition because If it isn't, or there's something going on that affects their financial investment in the property and the site. It can be tricky though, because you may have 3 or 4 people that you have to go against, versus just have or do enforcement on, as opposed to just one if it were owned and rented out. But my experience has been, because there's the homeowners association, you can also leverage that. So it would be going against the individual unit owners and the association, and that can tend to get things going. Let's see, for the architectural review, this is a bit of a weird spot in your zoning ordinance. So it does have the section, my phone shut down here, which says all the things in these zoning districts need to go through architectural review, and it has different classes of buildings depending on what the use is, and standards for how much brick you have to have, how much metal you can have, how much EIFS you can have on the exterior of the building. Why I didn't make a big fuss on this is when there's conflicts in the zoning ordinance, the rule of thumb that I've always been taught is you go with the most specific. So if there's kind of a general thing that says buildings need to look like this, and then you have a section for fishing huts that says fishing huts shall look like this. The specific for fishing huts controls. And in this case, there is specific language for mini warehouse facilities that, where is it? It says, the exterior of any mini warehouse shall be of a finished quality and design compatible with the design of structures on surrounding property. So for mini warehouse, there is specific language that addresses their appearance. So that's why I previously hadn't brought up the other architectural review. I'm not sure if it's been reviewed with the township's attorney, but that's my understanding, because there's specific language for this type, that's what you go with. And it would make sense because you generally wouldn't want to have a minimum amount of windows on the exterior of a mini storage facility, because then it becomes an attractive nuisance for folks who may find it easier to break in. I think those were the big questions that I noted. Was there anything else?
I think that was it. And
They
then-
brought up lighting, but I looked at the photometric plan and it looks like there's nothing going on, so.
Yep. What I'll say is it will be different from what's there. There's going to be more light than there is now, because there's trees and farm field. But the proposed lighting is within what your zoning ordinance says you can do. It's all going to be cut off angles, so it's going to be pointing down. It's not going to be pointing up or halfway in between. Most of it is going to be between the buildings, and the photometric plan shows that it is no measurable foot candles at the property line. Now that doesn't mean if you're standing at the property line, you may not see light that's bounced up and off, but it meets what your zoning ordinance says it has to be.
Thanks, Zach. The only other item I have is number 8, the irrigation system, if you want to touch on that. Keep it in here pretty strongly. This shall be added. I have it up on the screen, but in your list of potential conditions.
Yep, well, and this one, it's, well, planners, we use shall a lot, either shall or may. Those are our two main verbs. Because the exterior landscaping is important for this type of use, it mentions the type of screening to have around this. You have a fence and landscaping. Is that it's important to ensure that that landscaping is maintained in a healthy manner. And that in order to do that, watering it regularly can be important, especially when we get hot, droughty weather. So that's why the recommendation for that.
Thank you. Anybody else in the planning commission? Any comments?
I would like to see that before an occupancy permit was given to one structure, that the fencing and landscaping was done before you start renting them out, or at least condos, before they're for sale, I would like to see the outside and the fencing done if you're gonna start selling them. So the neighbors, if it did turn into a 3-year project, they're not driving by and looking at one finished, then gravel, and say it drags on for 5 years with the economy.
Thanks. So something to the effect of all exterior fencing and landscaping complete before occupancy.
That's how I feel. I mean, I think it would be much better for the neighbors, for the township.
Can we work through addressing that on a plan basis? I mean, I think, I appreciate your comment, you know, I'd like to make sure that from how we propose to lay it out, that it fits there, right? Because if we're to have to then remove all fencing for some reason, you know, that's an incredible expense to come through and tear fencing out, to then have to come back in and put all the fencing in. Or landscaping the same way, right? So I think that what I'd like to propose is we come back with maybe a phased-in approach and show you what we're doing. Something to that effect. Because, again, if we put landscaping all in, then all of a sudden we've got to do some more land balancing or something like that, and we've got to rip out $20,000 worth of landscaping, that's not doable. That's a very big burden and hardship just because we put landscape, and then the landscaping's been in for 2 years. And then you gotta rip it out.
Well, I feel if you could come up with a plan to go with it, you know.
That's what I'm saying, that's what I'm suggesting, is that we, let us lay it out, how we can go into phases and how we can, you know, create that which needs to be, you know, blocked in, or create what needs to be looked, you know, in the aesthetic approach that needs to be done, so that we can present that. I mean, I appreciate the comment, we've got to kind of.
No, I understand your expense. You're worried about if you had to tear it out.
Or work, I mean,
Right.
and who wants to, I don't think any neighbor wants to see us tear trees out again and kill them after they've been up for 2 years.
Right, but no neighbor wants to see it drag on for 5 years
I
either,
understand that. I get that.
and drive by it every day.
I don't want to see it drag out.
No, and I'm just saying the economy, we never know what it's gonna
I
do.
get that. I do.
Where will the first units be built? Which ones? Out by the 23 or along the
Right now, the
Fawcett
proposal is
roadside?
more of the ones that are along Fawcett, and then that what would come down into the front along US 23. So we would kind of start to, again, to cover that in, so that does create that, you know, that barrier, because there's really, on the back side, it's just the farm, right? So it's not as much of where that view would be visible. So more of the two buildings up on Fawcett Road, and then coming down on US 23 with the other two buildings.
So A, B, C, and D, and I think if you did that, then you could take care of all the landscaping and fencing on the old
Again, that's-
23 side
yeah.
and Fawcett side. I think that would alleviate most of our concerns, because then everything else would be facing fields.
Exactly, I get that, that's why that was my only comment, was let us we haven't fully laid it out, so I need to be able to give you that and say, hey, this is what we're proposing, based off of even these comments, right? So, you know, you guys can see what we're proposing.
Thanks.
Yeah, because I would think it would be a security issue too for the rest of the people who are buying, if there's open area for somebody to get in and out. You know?
But then the tricky part says, your zoning ordinance says for mini warehouse facilities, you shall have a fence around it.
Okay, well, then that takes care of that.
Well, then you may have to put up a temporary fence
May have to.
for that.
I mentioned about landscaping. They have these huge trees that they have cut out. And I'm gonna have to dig out all of those trees to put any landscaping. They just cut out these big trees, and they're huge. So what are they gonna do with those trees? They are cut down. They're very ugly if you like to go see them.
We just so everyone understands, we can't have any trees along Fawcett Road for line of sight issues. it's limited county, it says there is no trees that you can have along right there. So with the setback off of Fawcett has to be clear. So that again, some of the concerns of speed coming over the hill, they have to have line of sight, both the driver coming over and the person going to pull out or pull in can see that. And no trees can be planted.
Any other comments, Zach, or planning commission?
In regards to the architectural review, is that, I mean, is that?
Zach reviews, went over that.
Yeah,
The
he
mini
did.
warehouse part of it is specific. And so that's how we treated it in our last,
We did go over that.
multiple
Yeah, you-
last meetings, but it's,
And I know Steve's had many comments about the building.
yeah, I don't know if you have a question on that or just.
No other questions?
Anything else, guys? Zach, Ross, any for the public hearing? All right, so I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing and move back into the regular agenda.
Yep, vote on that.
Yep. Entertaining a motion.
Yep.
All right. Okay.
Support.
Okay, there's a motion and support to close the public hearing. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed? The public hearing is closed. We're going to move back to the agenda. First item was this item, Foster Storage Condominium Special Land Use, which we were discussing prior to the public hearing. So we'll go back to that for the Planning Commission. I know we were mentioning some like the phasing or.
Yeah, usually if we know a project's gonna be in phases, we'd like to have that show on the site plan.
Yeah.
So that the approving bodies can look at and see how are things gonna happen, when are they gonna happen. So that could be something that you may defer to the township board, or you could approve preliminary tonight and say for final, we wanna see it back next month with phasing and these other things addressed.
That should be a condition that goes to the board, that we recommend.
And all the road frontage condos get done first.
That the site plan specifically state what the phases are here. We're gonna build these first, then the ones to the south, then the ones on the west, whichever, however we want, that he wants to do it. But at least we'll know by looking at the site plan, the expectations of when each, what gets built first and what gets built second.
And the board will handle that
Well, I think that's the recommendation
then. Recommendation.
that we look for there. So I suspect what we need to do is go down the potential conditions for this.
Yeah, the beginning of them, a lot of them are other agency reviews. I have it up on the screen at the moment. The electrical portion of it, I think if it's noted that it will be underground from the pole, I think that would address
The site plan shows it coming from the drop into
Yeah.
that utility building,
Yeah.
and then it doesn't show it going from that building to the other buildings.
One thing I wanted to address on this, because I read this too, we don't have any plans for a sign out front. There won't be any type of marquee, any sign out front. So I know it's been addressed several times in these comments, and we don't have any, there will be nothing out there.
Thanks for clarifying.
The site plan shows monument sign under separate permit. Is that what you're referring to, Zach?
Yeah. So that should be removed then.
Yeah.
It'll be,
Now, you will have a sign when you're selling them, right? Some kind of real estate sign? Yeah, it's understandable.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm looking at these potential conditions, and 1 through 4 are just other agencies.
Correct.
So these,
Yeah. Agree that's required. It's
Yeah.
condition.
it's a condition that has
So
to be
that,
met.
1, 2, 3, well, some of them need to be added to the site plan, but I don't think you agree that you're gonna add it to the site
yeah,
plan.
absolutely. I mean, these are
Um,
comments that we took in just
5.
recently, so we're understanding that those things need to be added. Right.
6 was
6
addressed.
was addressed, it's in the bylaws, so you gotta take the trash out.
Yeah, that's off. 7 is, drain commissioner's area.
That fits in with the top
Yeah.
four then.
Add irrigation, which Ross will,
I'll need to go ahead
Administrative
on a
review.
set of plans. Once I have the plans, if you're making a recommendation, then I want to know, these are the plans that I am going to send to these other agencies for review. Verify that we're at a stage where,
I think we're close. Fixtures, that's on a plan that I have now.
It's on the site plan, but not the building plan element.
So add it to the building plan
Yes.
sheets.
did we ever get full clarification on the irrigation system, whether or not that's going to be required?
It is, right?
I think so.
That's what we talked
I
about.
don't recall a full consensus on this.
Where?
What's that?
Irrigation?
I don't know if it's required. I mean,
If it's required, then it should be shown on the plan, is what I'm saying.
Right, you're planning on installing that, right?
Yeah, we're gonna have irrigation.
Yeah, okay, so it's not an issue.
So the plan will need to be updated to reflect that.
Yeah. So 9 is just add the Lithonia light detail to the building plan. 10 is.
It's removed, he's removing the sign.
10. Storage is addressed to the bylaws.
Yeah, and so the reason why I have the note here of adding it to the site plan is the bylaws are a contract amongst the owners, and the township isn't necessarily a party to that. So if it's something that you want to be able to enforce, it should be on your site plan.
Then,
Yes.
then add. So Ross, make sure that that's on there, please.
Which one, I'm sorry?
11, no outdoor storage on the site plan, in addition to the bylaws.
At site plan and bylaws.
Well, I think it's in the bylaws.
Yes, the bylaws.
It's in the bylaws.
So you can't change the bylaws.
But we want it on the site plan
Same-
for Zach.
the
You
same
can't change the
thing-
site plan without going to the planning commission, but the HOA could change the bylaws, right?
It's the same thing with the refuse management too. That's in the bylaws, but it's not on the site plan.
But, yeah, okay, that's,
finish going over the bylaws on here too?
Building plan, that's what we have here, this whole entire set, correct? So this will just be with the site plan going
Right,
forward.
because according to 12, that's going to be put
Yeah,
together.
I think that comment is that when it's submitted, it should be part of the same document
Yeah.
as they receive.
Okay. 13 and 14 would go back up with 1 through 4, I would guess, right?
Yeah, and there's another review,
Another review.
whether if it's an agency or a consultant.
Right, but the language limiting storage of hazardous materials.
That's 15, yeah.
Yeah.
15.
That one's got to be on
Yeah.
there, as well as be in the bylaws,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Not included on the list is phasing. Whether we want to see that detailed out in plans or at least noted in the plans.
Yeah, phasing plan to be provided in this site
That
plan.
would be an additional condition on top of what's listed as suggested.
I would think so.
I would think so, to go to the board, it should be there.
And you indicated that they plan on doing that.
I'm sorry, John, was that?
You indicated you plan to do a phasing plan,
Yes.
and that'll be included in the site plan.
Does it need to be in the site plan, or just, where does that go?
I don't know where else it would go.
It would go in the site plan. generally.
Okay.
It just shows the work.
Because that's what we're approving, we're approving the site plan, right?
Sure.
It's,
Right, and we
site-
need to know where the phases are going to go.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole issue.
What we can expect to be done in phase 1,
Yeah.
obviously, phase 2, et cetera.
Okay.
And we would certainly encourage, or, from what we, Bill and I have talked about, and everyone else, is that we want to see A, B, C, and D, all landscaping to the north and the east in the first phase,
Right.
with the fencing. The rest of it can be done in later phases. Is that okay, Brandon?
Well, I think right now it is, but
That's what
again,
you-
I think the key thing, let us lay it out based off of us understanding how best for us, and then we can, but I don't see an issue with it right now, so if I'm sitting across from you right now, Steve, it's probably not an issue, but, to meet it, to make a commitment, say, a hard commitment says, this is how we want to propose doing this.
I really want to see
I
that.
hear what you're saying.
I really
Steve.
want to see that in.
What's that?
I really want to see the landscaping in on the north and the east. And the fence, I mean, just, because to me, that's what 90% of the people that are driving past that site are going to see.
Sure, I understand.
And the grading's gonna be done, right?
Yeah, I mean, all the land balancing should be accomplished by then, before any of that goes in, so.
And the retention pond in?
What's that?
You like the retention pond?
First thing you gotta do is retention pond.
Yeah, so then you're gonna, at least on the, US 23 side, that's a lot of the grading there is based on retention pond, so I don't think it'd
We have
be
a retaining wall there in the corner
retaining wall.
that's gonna have to be put in.
So you're not gonna be grading there after you start build unit 1, right?
Yeah, so here's my concern, right? So I hear everyone saying, hey, we want the north, northeast, all that, right? But, is this well, now we looked at it, we'd like to see complete the rest of it. I mean, we're making a statement right now that says, this is what we want done. And then if we put it up, then are you gonna come back and say, I think we want you to finish it?
Not if it's in phases. I mean, if we approve it in phases, then we can do it in phases.
Yeah, because the question is to me is how far into the phases before you complete the landscape? Do you wait till the very end, or do you do it partially? I mean, that's a good question.
Right. I mean, so we're deliberating between each other right now on this, and I could make a statement that says, yeah, we'll do it your way. Whatever you guys say, we'll do it. But is that the best way? And that's my only comment right now. Is that the best way to address this phasing in? I hear what you're saying, and I do. But I don't want to be here right now and sit across from you guys and say, yes, whatever you say, that's the best way to go. Maybe I have a different idea and I can bring it back and say, how about this one, right? But I do want to move forward too.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're trying to do here.
I know that, Kurt, yeah.
And then, but.
But only, you know, I'm afraid of getting locked in here, right? Where this is the law, this is it, and, you know, I gotta come back and say, well, we think this is a better way to do this.
Well, you
Can always
know,
amend the site plan.
you know, the other thing is too, we're reasonable on that stuff
Mhm.
too. I mean, the whole purpose here is to try to create a buffer between visually and conceptually with the lights and with noise and with everything else on the north and the east there, because those are the places that people are gonna be able to see in.
I get that, absolutely.
And like I said, the last thing I want to see is a half-finished area there that we didn't put any landscaping in, and now something happened and it didn't go right, and so I've got a bunch of empty space out here. And that looks bad for you, but it's bad for the township too.
So, you know, right now, the statement that I hear from you guys is, or, you know, what you're stating is that if you'll take the first phase and you'll take care of the north and the east from landscaping and the building on the phases on those areas, that's acceptable.
I think that's what we're saying, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then so on the south and the west, what is the statement then for landscaping for those? Wait till we do the next phases?
I think it can be shown as phase 2 or phase 3, however many phases you would plan here.
Sure. So, and that's my only question. So is that if you'll grant us and allow us to give you different phase areas after we complete phase 1, which is landscaping and those buildings, we'll have a plan in place on the others. I just don't, again, my concern is we get it in and then we get, hey, we don't like this. We didn't plan on that. And now we don't like this. And without,
You know, again, we're trying to be reasonable, but you have neighbors over there, and they have concerns.
Right.
We have concerns as a township. I mean, we want to encourage business development too. I mean, we're not trying to discourage you from the process of developing that area. We just want to make sure that we have a backstop in case things go south for one reason or another.
I think
so
landscaping.
here's I guess the statement I would make is, I'm okay with it right now, okay? Let's put it into the site plan or anything like that. If for some reason there's a hardship, there's a burden, there's something that comes up, then we would have to come before you again to make a change.
Yeah, I think the west and the south could be, if it was landscaping to be taken care of in future phases, I don't think we'd have a problem with that.
I don't.
No, sounds good.
Because, like I mentioned previously, 90% of the site that would be seen by most people would be already taken care of.
Sure. So, I guess to the board, the commission, I should say, I mean, yeah, I'll accept that, and if there's a hardship for any reason, then I have to come back and just, make some type of statement for amendment, or ask for amendment. I can accept that.
Only other item, unless you guys have more. I think, I forget, someone mentioned it, but the snow removal plan, I don't know if it's, it has to be, doesn't have to be a designated area, but I don't know if it is already, you guys have already incorporated it or planned for it.
I think it's.
Question that came up.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was a good question. The association will have to handle it. I mean, they may have to actually take some off-site if they have to bring in vehicles in and take it off, based off of their inability to get it into areas that are, properly, you can put the snow. It can happen at times, depending upon what you get over a season, right?
So that's not something that really we address though, is it?
No, it's a good thing to look at, but you don't have any specific standards like, say, Gaylord, where they say you must have excess area to pile up to 30 feet of snow.
Because do have one more question. Where does the handoff come from your ownership to transferring it to the homeowners association?
Yeah, it's spelled out in the bylaws. I mean, there is a time frame and there's a certain, percentage of units sold that it begins to phase out as you end up putting certain units in, you elect people into the board, and then eventually, essentially 2/3 in, I'm, removed as developer out.
Okay. Is that I didn't notice that in the agreement, is that there?
Yes, it's all in there. It's
I guess,
spelled.
okay.
Yeah, it's spelled.
That's my fault.
Shows step by step how it
Yes.
happens, when they become full ownership of the association.
Okay.
Item 6 is site plan, item 8. Going over the potential conditions, just to summarize so we don't miss
Yeah.
something.
6, 8, and 11.
11, yeah.
So Ross, do you have a list now of what the potential conditions are?
I'm gonna need you to go through them again, and I'm going to need a little bit more clarification on the timeline for things. For example, if I'm going to be sending this to these various agencies for review, I need to know, do we want to wait until these items have been addressed on the site plan and incorporated and then approved by myself with verification from the subcommittee? Just kind of a little bit more detail on, horse and cart type situation.
Is there anything, Brendan, under the conditions that we are suggesting here that would take you an inordinate amount of time to complete?
Well, no, I mean, we've got to get back in front of, my engineers have to, make these adjustments and changes. So, I would hope within a week to 2 weeks, they would have those, on the site plan. Because they're not difficult things to put in, they're not re-engineering things, they're just basically putting a lot of.
Yeah, they're just statements.
They're noting, and that's about it. So I don't think there'll be, it shouldn't be too long, but again, sometimes it takes a week or two to clear their calendars a little bit too. They don't just jump and say, yeah, I'll give you time, so.
End of the month?
I would hope by the end of the month.
And that would include the phasing information as well.
Oh, yeah, that's phasing information as well.
So we want to get all of that. We want to have the revised plans back.
Right.
I'll go through them, I'll verify with the subcommittee. At that point, then we can start sending it down the list to the various agencies. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
And then are we going over the ZBA with,
I think it goes to board.
Is it gonna come back here before it goes to the board though, or we can get it?
Well, if you make a recommendation right now for approval with conditions, then technically it would need to come back to you before it goes to the board. It would just be a combination of staff and the subcommittee to verify that the conditions have been fulfilled before the recommendation letter is provided to the board.
Okay.
The only other item, we had annual reports, but I don't know how it worked with this one. If that is something we wanna talk about or discuss or have as part of this one.
I guess you
For the
could.
commissioners to decide, I don't know.
Yes, exactly. No.
I don't know if you've seen these before, Zach, but if there's a benefit to an annual report. Sometimes in some of our special land uses, we have it, some we don't.
I've not seen it for this type of product, and this is a bit rare in Michigan still. When I was in Indiana, Steuben County, we had maybe 6 of these types of projects. Because lots of lakes, people live 2-4 hours away, they didn't want to haul the boats back and forth. Condominium ownership, we didn't require any annual reports from them. Did you get to 16? It's on the next page, it's kind of hard down there.
Yeah, that's another one of those that needs to be on the site plan and as well as the homeowners association, or whatever you want to call it, condo owners association. So I guess what you need is a motion for conditional approval, and then
Yeah,
we'll read off each one of them.
as long as there's no further questions or clarifications
I have
needed.
one more.
But, yeah.
So you made a comment that when 2/3 of the buildings are sold, you lose your position?
It slowly transfers out. As a developer, you transfer out of that seat as operating the association. So then it goes to the ownership of the owners in the association. So yeah, you do as a developer, you eventually step out of that responsibility. You're not running the association.
So if this complex is 2/3 done and it was sold out, are you no longer responsible?
No, I'm still the developer on the project. I'm still the developer. And I'll have to get the language out of it, but I don't completely get out till I'm 100% out, but all my shares slowly decrease over time.
Okay.
So I don't have the same voice at 2/3 that I did at 1/3 sold.
At the beginning, the way these, yeah.
Yeah, I
Developer has
am
100%
running
control.
everything in the beginning,
Yeah.
but I'm, based off of percentages, I'm phased out to the very end, then I'm done completely.
Okay.
So you are always the builder of
Builder of the, on
record.
record, yes.
So I
For
couldn't
the
come in
developer.
and say, well, you've sold 100 of them so far, I want Larry over here to build.
No, I'm the developer.
Okay.
And that type of stepping is very common for
Yeah.
most condominium associations. In addition, when you have a condominium association and you have the plan and you show all the buildings, there's an obligation for the developer to build what's in there, otherwise you have to go through a big process of modifying those. So there's a very detailed thing on the condominium documents, the Exhibit B, where you have to say, this thing is not, may or may not be installed, otherwise there's an obligation to the association. It's really weird and tricky.
Good question, Bill. Any other questions?
So you looking for a motion?
Yes, yeah, I'm just looking to make sure I didn't forget anything. We got the items that I was remembering, the hazardous material and the outdoor washing.
Yeah,
That was on there, that wasn't seeing them, but I didn't scroll down far enough, so. Yeah, so I would entertain a motion at this time, unless there's further questions from any commissioners.
Kurt, you're good. Do you want to take a shot at it?
Well, let's,
Or we could, Ross, for clarification, would it be beneficial to go through these items?
For the motion, I will need everyone. I mean, if you're just doing numbers, that's fine, but I'll need them clearly noted.
Okay.
Then I'm also gonna want clarification a little bit further on the order in which, but I guess we can figure that out after. As far as like the condo documents, master deeding bylaws, those are gonna need to be reviewed by the attorney. Am I sending those right away, or are we gonna require revisions to them prior to?
Yeah.
Or is it just, those are good to go, and then we need these revisions to the site plan? Just clarification on that. Because all these things are gonna need to happen if they're all conditions, and it doesn't make sense for certain items to go ahead of other items.
I'd recommend update all the plans first before you send it out for review. Update all the bylaws. I don't know if there's any changes to the bylaws based on
I
this.
don't
but
think there's
I don't
anything
think there is.
substantial.
And then, so that's ready to go to,
But if you're amicable and the applicant's amicable with the condo documents as is, then I can go ahead and forward those tomorrow, get that review process started,
Yeah.
while we wait for the revised site plans before I send it out to the additional agencies.
I think, Brandon, I think you would want to get these things going, the individual agencies, as soon as you can, because
Absolutely.
you want to get the comments back and address those.
And get this thing moving.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so we'll just start now and,
As far as the documents, but we want to wait until the revisions that happen following this meeting before we send the actual plans to, say, the county drain commissioner's office, et cetera.
yes, correct.
Does that make sense to everyone?
But no holding.
I think that, Ross, my opinion would be is, you know which agencies need to have them at which stage, right?
I do, but it's based on the recommendation of the planning commission.
We will do our part, I guess my point would be is, we'll have our part done in capturing the items that need to be put in the site plan, so that we have that, and it's not a holdup for you, as soon as we can. But anything that you can do, I guess, in the meantime, because you don't need our comments on certain things, I guess that's great.
I guess for clarifications, how do we feel about the condo documents at this point? Do we feel that we're ready to go ahead right away and send them, or?
attorney needs to review that. I mean,
I'm not an attorney.
I read
I'm
through
not an
it.
attorney.
I mean, the use, there was stuff about parking for 12 hours, but most of the stuff is, in my opinion, attorney language. I mean,
I send those out.
I send those out.
Yeah, the main things were, like restriction of, like you said, parking and all that, and trash.
Most of these look like they're just additions to the site plan, not necessarily the documents.
Yes.
You know, make sure the attorney knows that there's going to be phasing. Sometimes they want to have that
Included
monumented in the documents.
Yes, I would entertain a motion. And I think that will probably precede the clarification to Ross, depending on the motion.
Very procedure.
You want a motion to pass? A motion, because this
Not
is a
exactly
special
motion
use
for
and also
conditional.
site plan review. Do they need to bring it up
Special
in
land
two
use
separate motions?
and preliminary and final site plan.
For special land
It's
use.
based on the conditions here. I think the only one we didn't agree to was remove the sign, remove the sign, so you're gonna move the.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's really
special land use
based on
and
all.
site plan.
So you could have 10 was.
Right.
By removing the sign.
And we added the ones about the phased.
Yes, plus the phasing plan.
It's going to be kind of complicated, but we're going to make a recommendation
For special land use and preliminary and final site plan approval
to the board.
with the conditions
Conditions
based on,
noted as
probably a
follows.
date on this review, maybe if you.
Yes.
The, June 9th
Yeah.
report, the, potential, all the potential conditions, 1 to 16, plus the phasing plan.
Correct. With the idea that, well, do you want us to go through them line by line, Ross?
Not necessarily if it's all of them.
Okay. But the ones that need to be added to the site plan were 5, 6, 8, 11, and 16. Correct?
Right.
Yes.
And there's a 17th.
Well, it says that right in there, So, I mean,
Okay.
unless you
Yeah,
want
it
to
says that.
exclude,
We agreed.
you can just say items 1 through 11 on the review dated June
Okay.
9, 2022.
Phase.
I don't know how detailed we gotta be, it seems like.
The
Well, I
phase-
can fill it in.
Too much.
If I have all the content there, then I can just copy and paste from the conditions here.
All right.
So that included the phased approach and the landscaping on the north and east sides.
In the first phase.
So it's going to be items 1 through 16 plus item 17, which is a phasing plan that shall be provided, and the phasing plan is going to include information on that. So it's a total of 17 items for conditions.
For conditions.
And we're gonna cross off number 10.
Maybe just leave it, because by relocating, you're just removing the sign.
It does say if necessary.
If necessary.
So that's kind
Just
of an
didn't
optional one.
All right.
confuse things, we're saying 1 through 16 except for 10, this is saying all.
Got it. All right.
Support.
Okay, there's a motion to recommend conditional approval for preliminary site plan and final site plan
And special land use.
and special land use Foster storage condominium application. Any discussion from the commissioners at this time? Who was a supporter? Did you get who supported it?
Me.
Kurt.
Got that.
So, I don't know if we're, okay, there's a motion and support to recommend these approvals. If I do roll call, Ross, or just, is it simpler?
And it's typically all in favor, but
Yep,
we
so
can
if
go to
we, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed?
So can I just get clarification just real quick so we can, so that'll go to Ross, you'll make all of those, you'll understand, you'll see the site plan changes, you'll do all the due diligence, and then as long as it meets the requirements of the planning commission, then you'll pass that on to the.
I'm going to go through it. I'm going to verify with the planning commission subcommittee, which is John, Rich, and Kurt.
Okay.
And then if I get the go ahead and I see that everything's okay, we'll send it to those agencies. As far as the condo documents, my understanding is I can go ahead and send those to our attorney tomorrow to start that review process.
Okay, and then from there?
From there, once all the items are fulfilled, then we would issue a letter of recommendation, an official letter of recommendation with all the supporting documents to the township board for them to make their determination.
What have you seen when you're going out to these outside entities, time-wise?
Turnaround, it's all across the board, it depends. There's too many variables to really give a ballpark.
If you were, where do you sit today? I mean, are you saying we would have this before the board in 30 days, in 90 days, 120 days? What would be your answer?
Like I said, it's difficult to put a ballpark on it with all the variables, but, I mean, if I were to have to put a number on it, I would say probably between, if all goes perfectly and we get decent turnarounds, I'm saying we get the plans back within the next week. And don't hold me to it, but somewhere between 30 and 60.
If we don't cancel the meetings.
It could be less than that. It depends on how quickly we do get turnaround from the additional agencies. I'm anticipating that if I get the condo documents to the attorney right away, that should be fairly quick. I mean, he's contracted with us, but as far as like the Livingston County entities, that's completely out of our control. You know, we're not cutting them a check for it or anything. We're kind of at their mercy. So,
Okay.
but I mean, we can put as much of a push on it as possible. It's just we can't guarantee it.
I get it, even just, as developers, we're just trying to figure out what's next, where do we, what's the timing? So I'm just checking, that's all.
It seems like the government agencies should have standard review times.
I think most of them do, but depending on the volume of things that they have to review, it could be 30 days, it could be 90 days, it could be 120 days.
So Ross,
We're actually, the drain commissioner's office, for example, is working on streamlining that process and making it more consistent across the board.
do you have any other items from planning commission for this one, Ross, that we need clarified? I know we,
I think I have good enough clarification right now on how to move forward.
Okay.
I'm gonna send everything as far as the condo documents to the attorney to get review done on that. I mean, it does say, as far as condition number 14, that the condominium documents shall be approved by the attorney, planner, and engineer. I guess, maybe some clarification on, Zach, have you had a chance to really dive into it? Is that something that you want? Is actually all three of those bodies reviewing it, or is just the attorney and the planner sufficient, or do we want all three? Or just one, or whatever?
For this one, it's mostly the attorney that's gonna do the heavy lifting. There are some minor things that the engineer would probably want to look at, like legal descriptions and utility plan that you guys require. For planning side, there's not really a lot on this. The language that we're concerned with are already in there.
In your opinion, as far as, say, engineer review, to just send them everything all at once? Just say, here's the site plan as
Yeah.
conditionally approved, and also just as a supplement.
Yeah, if you send engineers just the condominium documents, they'll get cranky. Don't do
That's what I was
that.
gonna say.
Don't do that. They want something to look at.
All right.
Yeah, just include it, then they get the full,
Yeah.
the full picture.
I think I'm in good shape here. If I need any additional clarification, I can just reach out to the subcommittee, but I think we're good here.
okay, thanks, Ross.
Ross, you'll submit to me, just an overview of the statements on, back to us?
As far as
Yes,
the
17.
conditions,
Yeah, the 17.
you want me to just shoot you an email with all of those in there, or?
Yeah, this is what we
Yep.
requested, so that we, so I make sure that I capture.
Got it.
Okay, so does that conclude old business item number one?
It does.
So, next on our agenda is sightline. I would entertain a motion to suspend order of business and move new business item number one ahead of old business item number two. It's up to the planning commission.
Sure. Let's do it.
Someone want to make that motion?
So moved.
Okay. Ross, did you catch that?
Kurt motion, Steve support, move new business number one ahead of all other business.
Yeah. Okay, all in favor of moving that new business item number one ahead of old business number two, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. Okay, so we're gonna go to new business item number one. Hornbacher, sorry if I pronounced it wrong, contract for limited storage special land use. So is the applicant in attendance?
Yeah.
Oh, hi. Would you be able to come and give like a summary
Yep.
to the podium, please? That'd be great.
You want me to come up there?
Yeah, if you could. That would be helpful. Easier to hear.
My name is Christina Horbacher. So basically, we want to use the property for our house and the pole barn for my husband to store some of his equipment on and fix some things here and there if he needs to. We're only going to be storing one vehicle outside is what we talked about. And then we are going to asphalt the driveway, and then around the pole barn, we will have whatever you guys recommend needs to be put down around it to make sure there's no leakage or anything. And I sent Ross a updated
Yep.
site plan.
There were two you got today. We're looking for the latest one here. separate document.
Yeah.
Did you change anything other than the offset to the pond?
I think there was three.
Didn't
things
quite
changed.
look at it. I think there were a few minor changes. I gave a list of just some
I have
preliminary
one
comments.
second, I have the email.
Not that big a deal, but I just had that.
They were
comment.
all
That's
pretty minor, just basic requirements for site plan review, as well as the standards for contract equipment storage. Just a few.
Yeah, this was the document, I believe.
Does that show the 50
Yeah.
5 foot or whatever from the pond?
So can we fix the proposed setback, the dimension provided between the proposed dwelling, attached garage, there was no dimension, he fixed that, and then the proposed well location is not shown, and I believe he fixed that.
Yep, there's a well, it shows the front yard setback for the dwelling now, and it's, the pond setback, yeah.
There's no setback issues, correct?
Not on this plan, no.
Yeah,
Well,
no, we-
with the gravel around the barn, that's not for storing equipment?
No, that's just, if he puts if he drives the truck around,
Okay.
yeah, we're not gonna store any equipment on the outside, it will all be in the pole barn. I also, brought the revised plan that you told me to fix about the employees and the, hours of operation.
The use statement?
Yes, he just said 9 to 5, he's not gonna be working out there at, 10 o'clock at night or midnight, and also no employees will be on site ever, so.
You said you had a revised one?
Yeah, I brought the, I typed it out and brought it.
Just, hey Ross, just, when I'm looking at this, is the parcel to the east, is that the,
It's
Industrial.
part of the TRWZ.
that's the
part of
industrial zone piece?
Actually, it's still zoned FR, but it is, yeah,
But it butts right up to it, doesn't it?
yep.
Yeah, I thought.
It butts right up to M1.
I drove right there, and then on the other side of this, on the west, is the Town Hill Golf Course
Maintenance.
maintenance building with all their outside storage and that.
Yeah, yeah, it's surrounded by a lot of.
Now, what is that
industrial
zone?
uses.
Which one? That's an industrial, isn't
The golf course one?
Yeah.
FR.
It is?
Yeah.
Thanks. I don't know if there's any other comments or items you want to mention.
No, not unless you need to.
No, that's it for now. This is the first time it's in front of the planning commission, so I'm going to have a summary. So, thank you.
Yeah.
The main items were the setbacks and there were no issues on those that I saw at first.
So this is kind of an introduction.
Yeah.
It's the first time the full planning commission actually has eyes on it, so procedurally, right now would be a time to offer some comments, some initial, items. If you want to see anything else on the site plan, if you feel that the use statement needs additional items, I just passed around the latest use statement, so everyone wants to take a look at that.
Yeah, I looked at it briefly, but the equipment didn't change, right? You said just the hours and stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe it would make sense to quantify this. It did say a few used drill rigs, very little product that I use frequently, possibly extra flatbed semi-truck. Doing some repairs and maintenance on my trucks and equipment inside. So I mean, is there, say business is growing and then now you have 50 employees. Should we
No.
quantify it here saying up to this many trucks or this?
As much detail as you want to see should be in the
Yeah.
use statement.
Yeah, so, that was my only item, and obviously, we'll have to see this again, right? And what.
It does require a public hearing,
Yes.
so at minimum,
Yeah.
there has to be at least one other.
That was my point. I think in the past, it's very helpful if the use statement is part of the site plan.
Just incorporate it.
Yeah, incorporate it, and it's sitting here with the visual is super helpful. That's one
Yeah.
item I was gonna
Yeah.
mention.
And I think this was a good summary of what's gonna happen. I think to put it in the use statement is something that we can come and say, here's what they're allowed to do. 95 is a good example. Then you stuck to 95. Or like, maybe just something that you can quantify.
So you want it more formalized, kind of breaking it down a little bit more?
I mean, that's my thought, I think the intent here is very reasonable.
This is one when I saw it, I thought, well, this is gonna be easy. Because, I mean, you look at what's to the west, because you could look at what's to the east. I think
Can I,
this is a good use.
can I say something real quick? If the property next to us goes up for sale, I think there's like a vacant land right next to us. We plan to buy that if it ends up going up for sale, just so that we're not, disturbing the.
To the east.
I'm not
Well, to the
really-
east is parking lot.
It is the west.
I'm bringing it
There's a
up.
gap between the two?
I'm gonna bring it up.
Between where the golf course stores their stuff, there's land right in between there.
So we've got,
But it's vacant.
Everyone might take a look at that.
yeah, there's like a 3-acre piece between the golf course site and that one. That's about it.
That's been moved to 20 years out there.
Yeah, and the intent of trying to clearly define the scope of the use, because it is a special land use, is to prevent that it becomes a nuisance, right? In the future where it expands and all of a sudden it's a completely different thing than what was presented in front of the township. And so that's the intent of that, and as Steve mentioned, there maybe is next door or whatever, but that's the intent, to make sure it's defined and it stays that way. But, yeah, so Ross, I don't know if you had other comments in here.
Well, my opinion on it is, we would just want to make sure we're in a good spot. Do we want a formal Carlisle Workman review for this? I know initially, we asked that, Zach, if you just had a chance to kind of do a general overview and provide some comments, that may be sufficient, but I wanted to leave it up to the planning commission because of the, well, kind of how basic the request is and where it's located, and whether or not that's going to be warranted. So that's a decision that I want to hear from the planning commission is, how in-depth do we want that review? Is the site plan going to be sufficient? Do we need additional engineering, or do we think that we're okay? Do you want to try to revisit it in a year? Make sure there's no significant changes, and if there are, then, for some special land uses, that's been how it's treated. You'll approve it, say, we don't need a fully engineered site plan at this time, based on the specifics of the use, unless there is to be some
'Cause
substantial
I think that's what we
expansion.
were looking at, is not having to go through a formal survey and have a formal site plan done. This is pretty close to,
Oh, yeah, it's actually very nice.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I don't know how commissioners feel about it. I know the reviews from Zach are very helpful. I don't know what that entails difference-wise.
And I can talk about anything at any
Yeah.
time. There's a fabulous, I think it's on CBC TV show called 22 Minutes. It was like Daily Show before Daily Show. There's a segment where one of the guys would come to America and ask ridiculous questions, called Talking to Americans, and he'd get them to talk about things that, like the Canadian National Igloo. And I'm very good at just talking about anything. So I can do a quick thing here. So at first I was very nervous because most zoning ordinances, including yours, have lots of sections that says one lot, one use. But yours has very specific language that says, you can do this where you've got a house. Most ordinances will just kind of call this a home occupation, but yours was very much written tailored for this type of operation. You can feel it as you read it. So because it is a special land use, that's what triggers the site plan. As you've already touched, there are a lot of things that traditionally go on a site plan that aren't really necessary here. So as part of your discussion, if there are things that you want to see that's not on here, let them know. Just to get everyone's mindset, this is from the Contractors Limited Storage Specific Standards. A couple of the conditions, one is that it's owner occupied, so that might be something also to include in the site plan, so that sometime in the future it's not a rental house and a contractor's facility there. Very easy fix, you just put a note on the side. If operated as a contractor's limited storage, it's owner occupied. Lot area at least 3 acres, it meets that. Enclosed storage, So this is where it talks about all materials and equipment must be stored and completely contained within an enclosed building. There can be one commercial vehicle parked outside. So that first bit, no outdoor storage, again, use statement, put it as a note on the site plan for the special land use. If there is an area where vehicles intended to be stored outdoors, that should be shown on there. And as mentioned, you may want to have asphalt or concrete or something there, just so in case there's any leaking hydraulic fluids or whatever, that it's contained and doesn't go down. Also, although it's not the case here, but it's good practice, if, for example, we're shown on the eastern property line, you would want to consider screening. Now, in this case, it's not really as important because of the neighbors, but it could be. All portions of the site that are used for employee parking or commercial vehicle parking shall be screened from view of adjacent properties and road rights of way. So if they are going to say we may have an employee or two on site, that should be shown with whatever screening, and it could be existing trees to remain. Primary or section line road access, center meets that. Non-resident parking, and that's, again, if they're going to have non-resident employees, they get to park there for up to 14 hours at a time. That would be added on there. Exterior of any accessory building shall be a finished quality design compatible with the design of structures on surrounding properties so as to not detract from predominant residential character of the district. So maybe some details in the site plan about what the building's going to look like. If it's going to be stick built, if it's going to be pole barn or whatever, just so you can evaluate that. Let's see, no sign shall be permitted other than those allowed for normal residential use. And maximum size of accessory building. This one I've read a couple times, I almost understand it. It goes, no accessory building or total of all accessory buildings used for contractor storage shall exceed 5% of the maximum permitted lot coverage on the site. So that math should probably be shown on here just so that it can be reviewed and made sure that it meets. Other than that, for the applicant and the public and the planning commission, they can always amend it in the future. So if they want to have employees in the future, they could come and amend it. They could put it now to say, if we do have it, we'll have up to X people here and here's where they park. They don't have to. For the applicant, do know that if you do add employees and the township finds are parking out there and working on the site, then that would be a violation of the approval. So make sure you plan ahead or you come in before changes happen. Again, reminder, special land use, you have a public hearing here, just like we had today, and you make recommendation to the township board for the final decision on the special land use and the site plans.
On the application, it says 80 by 80. On the plan, it says 60 by 80. What is it going to be?
60 by 80.
It is 60 by 80?
I don't know why.
How high is the eave height on this building going to be? Sidewalls?
I honestly don't know if that would be, my husband would have to answer that, sorry.
16
I
plus?
can call him.
Because you probably need like a 14-foot overhead door, I'm thinking, to pull stuff in.
Yes, yeah.
So you need 16 plus, okay.
Which in the zoning district, maximum permitted height is 40 feet.
So we're,
Yeah, just something to that point to note it when it comes for a public hearing, so that way it's noted on the plan. So it's noted on the plan,
It's not
when
even.
it comes back, that way it's clear what the height is.
you might want to have an elevate, just a simple elevation.
So we want to see basic architectural type.
Basic, just a sketch.
So sketches for, so this is a weird one where it requires that you reside on the site. So typically for a land use permit for a dwelling, that just comes into the office, it's not a formal review thing. I think it should be noted that if you don't care about the house, you don't care about the house, and then it would just default to the basic standards for land use permit. It meets the minimum floor area, it meets the minimum design standards, roof pitch, all that good stuff.
Right, what we care about is the accessory building.
Right, the
So
portion.
we're not required anything in it beyond what's required in the
Right.
sorting orders, right?
Does the house, excuse me, John, I interrupted you. Does the house have to be up first?
I mean, in terms of just a house and a barn, if the contractor's limited storage was not part of it, you could pull the permit for both at the same time. The barn could actually go up first, as long as the home is completed within a year.
But you can't pull a permit for the barn before the house?
Correct.
Okay.
It would need to be concurrent.
Yeah, because you can't necessarily say where the accessory building is gonna be located in reference to the house.
And you were planning on building these both at the same time?
Mhm.
Okay.
Are you familiar with your neighbors? TRW?
I'm sorry, say it again?
Are you familiar with TRW?
No.
Okay. Have you been out on the property?
Mm-hmm.
Because this gets pretty loud from
Oh, the
TRW.
factory?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We, right now, actually, we live right next to a train, so the
Okay.
factory is not gonna be much, but, yeah, that's where we plan to keep, most of the trees up on that side. And yeah, we went out on the property and, we can definitely hear it, but it's not gonna be too bad of
Okay, do you know what's behind you?
farmland?
Couple lagoons.
What is that? I'm sorry, what is that?
Wastewater treatment.
That's, TRW has ponds right behind your house.
Oh, okay.
That,
So what, I'm sorry, like,
they don't hook up to the sewer.
They have to as soon as that system fails.
Well,
Right now,
it's still in process, so.
so it's bad news for us.
Well, I'm just telling you,
Okay.
are you aware of what the situation is?
you know, because I don't want you to build and then say, you know, hey, you gotta do something with the neighbor.
Okay.
So I'm just advising you what's behind you right now.
Okay, I appreciate that. Sorry.
You
I
know,
had no idea.
Yeah, not part of the application process, but.
It's just, so you don't get in here and then you come to us and say, you gotta do something with your neighbor.
Yeah, okay.
Not
I'll
building.
let my.
Well, yeah, not the other neighbor, just down the road,
Oh.
on the corner.
He's on the corner.
But I just wanted to tell you.
Yeah, does it stink or what? I'm sorry.
I don't know if it stinks, I don't go back there,
Okay.
but, I mean, I just thought I would bring it up to you.
I appreciate that.
I've never smelled anything getting gas or anything. Have you smelled stuff there?
Well, no, but the lagoons are just here,
Mm-hmm.
so we're never right by there.
The deer don't blow, so.
I just wanted to bring it to your attention.
I'll let him know that. I'm filling in for my husband. He's working, so. I'll let him
It's over a quarter mile from the closest lagoon to the property line,
It is a quarter mile?
over 0.28-ish.
Well, the wind sometimes
Yeah.
blows that way,
Yeah.
so.
Thanks.
I guess the way I see this one, almost everything here is permitted use under FR.
Yep.
Besides,
Yeah.
I mean, you can have power equipment, and you're just having 2 drill rigs and a semi-truck, and work on them periodically. You can do that in farming.
Let's make it as easy as we can.
Yes, especially with this location, it could be another factory or something with the future land use map, so.
So Ross, do you
I
have
think
the
this is a good plan.
items we
As far as
requested
your
listed?
Reiterating them would be best, just to make sure. What I have so far is that we do want to tighten up the use statement to be more specific on specific items, such as, you know, clarify hours of operations, employees, employee parking, all of that. But yeah, if you could go over them again, I think that would be a benefit.
Yeah, that was it, and then having it on the site plan.
So update use statement, incorporate use statement as notes onto site plan.
Yeah. And then, was just
Building elevations, just a sketch with dimensions.
For just the barn.
Yes.
And then one item I forgot to mention, when we're talking about the use statement, Ross, is that
document that there will be no signage, and maybe it's probably already in there when it's put on the site plan. That was all I remember. That was anything we missed that we just mentioned.
Can't think of anything.
Okay.
As far as formal review, do we want to send it out to get something like we did for the storage condos, or do we feel that's not necessary?
For Zach's review, Sam?
We can
You
still
do a good
get
job
his-
of review, Zach, but I don't think it's needed personally, but that's up to you.
I'm not trying to take business away from you.
No, I'm plenty busy, don't worry about me.
I think if it wasn't contractor, if it wasn't a business-owned equipment, someone could be building this without even coming to the planning commission.
Correct.
So consensus that a review's not needed?
Nope. Right.
Okay, all right. Clear, Ross?
So as far as public hearing, do you want to get that going the next regular meeting?
Yes, if we have the updated.
So we want to have the updated plan and use statement ASAP, and I should schedule the hearing for this next meeting.
If the applicant's all right with that?
Are you good with that?
Keep this moving for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else, Ross, on this one?
Are you clear with what they're asking for as far as just updating the use statement and then adding that information to the site plan?
Yeah,
Okay.
so you want the barn, like what the barn's gonna look like, basically, right? So like the plan that we gave you, but the dimension, or the actual.
It would be an additional page kind of showing like a rendering of the barn, kind of like a standard elevation drawing.
Okay,
But also it should show, or at least note, what the finish is going to look like.
okay,
You know, as much detail as possible on it.
okay,
Roof pitch, elevations are sides of the building, what they look like, where the doors, the windows, stuff like that.
okay.
Colors.
Any other items for that?
Ross, we'll have, we'll be able to get this in July. Great.
Good, Ross. Okay, so that was new business item number 1. So the next agenda item is old business item number 2, which is sightlines. And we discussed this at length, just for those awareness at the last workshop meeting. Different, Ross did a lot of work. Put together some data for us on one of our lakes that half of it is in Tyrone Township, the other half is not. Just to give us an example and kind of like food for thought or something to consider as we look at this. And so, as we've talked, there's many different ways to approach it. I don't know if anyone has questions on this right at the moment, but certainly it is an area of, and Ross, you can correct me if I get out of line here, but it is an area of contention within our township, and maybe it's a good way of summarizing it.
Well, it always is, yeah.
And I don't know that we'll ever fix that contention, but it's certainly something we should try to do our best.
Well, basically, I guess if I could add something.
Yeah.
I've yet to see in any of my research any examples of sightline regulations that are perfect. Some of them may be better than others. A lot of them are very specific to the conditions of that particular lake. So those regulations that, in my mind, may work the best are based on topography and layout and existing, all the variables surrounding specific areas. it's really hard to come up with a blanket regulation that can be fairly, placed on every single waterfront property in a particular municipality.
Right, and we do have lakes that are in, this one is an example, is in a different township too.
Yep.
Plus we have Marl Lake, which is in a different county,
Yep.
as well as a different township. So it makes it very interesting if you are within spitting distance of the line of demarcation there as to what enforcement would be applied in that situation.
We can only enforce what's in our own township.
Well, yeah, I know that, but you get into some real questions about, okay, well, how come this guy can move closer than I can? No.
Or is it a different township?
Yeah.
Thanks for calling.
How come your taxes are lower than mine?
Well, we did talk, Ross, about coming up with like an average of the setbacks for each lake and saying that is gonna be the baseline we're gonna start with. Is that where are we still?
That was what was kicked around at the last subcommittee meeting. This is the first time that it's actually.
Well, it's been kicked around before that, and you prepared it, and we looked at it. I mean, is that the way we want to go?
Yeah.
That's what you want to figure out now, at a formal meeting.
Before we have to do more research.
Right.
Or data collection.
Right now you can give me direction to put together more information as necessary.
I do think that it should be lake specific. I know it's a little bit of work for you, but I think that, it'd be a little more work, but I think we get maybe a better result. So that we did it that way?
Currently, within our township, all the lakes, the minimum is 50, correct, Ross?
As far as the setback
The
from any body
minimum
of water.
setback, yes. And then, so what our ordinance does is it allows us to say, if something exists that becomes a conflict, we can move it further back. So
It's
that
very
is
confusing.
where the
You're
confusion
almost
comes
there.
in.
We can bring it up. It's footnote X.
I mean, how many have we had in the last month, Ross? 4? I mean, it's
At
confusing.
least, yeah.
It's very.
I forget which article.
Really?
It's gonna be right under state of
Yeah.
regulation, or, it's in the state of regulations, I believe, the footnotes
No.
are in there.
You can't lose anywhere.
Someone's,
Well, you just can't just take the document and say, let me follow this and do it. It's like, just,
Okay,
oh,
so-
whatever you feel.
Keep going, keep
No.
going.
I mean,
It's X, so it's.
Okay.
it's 2 paragraphs.
Well, no matter what you do, somebody's ox gets gored on this. It depends on which side of the deal it is, because the lakes are not standard. There's coves and peninsulas and all other kinds of stuff that create site issues.
And you guys decided against rounding the lakes.
Yes,
That-
yes.
Eagle wouldn't let us.
Would not be desirable.
So we gotta change something. I think that's the, what everyone agrees about.
So Ross, this is a hypothetical, right? So let's say we remove this footnote from our ordinance. What would that do if you were building a home on a lake?
If we were to do that, then it would default to setbacks,
Yeah, it'd just be 50
It
foot.
would
foot.
default to 50 foot.
unless there were additional setbacks that were added in. I mean, there's a number of ways that you could do that. If that's how you wanted to treat it, and you wanted to do a setback averaging thing and increase setbacks for a certain lake or area, then you could do that, or you could just say, nope, 50 foot everywhere. And it is
Same as,
typical.
then it would be same as all the other properties in the township that are not on lake.
Correct.
Because,
Because right now, there's nothing to protect line of sight for any other property other
Right,
than
yes.
lakefront property.
But there's actually 2 setbacks for lake property. Setback from the lake, setback from the road.
Well, and sides, I mean, there's setbacks for all sides.
yeah,
Right,
just
right.
like any.
So your envelope of where your building is, but
So some lakefront properties, the front yard setback is gonna be 50, other ones that are zoned LK1, it's 35.
You said front yard, you're talking about roadside.
Yeah.
Roadside. Is the rear yard setbacks in these zoning areas,
well, I'm assuming it's a lake zoning, so that is a special setback, and the lakeside is considered the rear yard setback?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. So there's some lakefront properties that are R1, there's some that are LK1, there's even some that are RE. Like, what is it? Lake Shannon, for example. All of Lake Shannon in our township, that's all R1. It's not LK1. Like
But
Lake
the
Tyrone,
setback off the water's edge is still 50.
It's still 50. Yep.
Yeah, because that's going above and beyond the standard setback.
Yep.
That is the high water market.
Ordinary high water mark. Yep.
Yeah, because, and obviously this conversation we've had multiple times, but if you have a property next to a field, which I do, in my case, that's why it came to mind, but then I could, realistically, why wouldn't the same thing apply to my view of that field? Because it adds value to my home.
That's a big
So
philosophical
you
thing.
get into that whole argument, right? So then, as a township, as a planning commission, how can you plan for every scenario?
Well, you would be valuing a certain view over
greater, of course, yeah, and that's what I'm saying. So then, I believe, like, if you look at this, if people tried to make it so you could make everyone happy. It's very confusing if you read this, but I don't know what everyone feels, but my from one perspective, right, increasing it is, one avenue, but then that could potentially, you say, hey, it's been 50 feet for years. Now, what's the justification? But I don't know. There's his thoughts on it.
I don't.
Just throw out ideas so we all.
If someone builds a house way in the back and they're the first one there, they don't own all those views of that entire lake, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they're built their house way up to the road and you want to build closer, that's your property. And maybe we can extend some of those setbacks for different lakes, to get a little further, but.
Hypothetically, if you were to increase the setback and there was a situation, an instance where a lot, you just could not make that work, there's also the avenue of getting a variance. I mean, that's also always a potential option.
So when you think about writing zoning code, a couple things that's in the back of every planner's mind. One is due process, so make sure that there's a clear process for folks to follow, and equal protection. So that's the concept that if you throw the same property in, you'll get the same answer out no matter who's sitting at the table.
Yeah.
And this one is very challenging to ensure both of those. And I think, if you do increase the setback, you've got the measurements, you have a very compelling argument of this is why we set it here, because we went around the lake and 90% of the houses meet this. You also talked last time about including language of if there's an existing structure and you remove it for whatever reason, you can rebuild within that building envelope. So that provides another relief valve for houses that may have been closer without having to get a variance.
So in your, based on that, Zach, if this footnote was removed, would, as you mentioned, equal protection, would it be satisfied with a minimum setback of 50 feet?
Whatever the number you come to.
Yeah, I'm just saying, because
Yeah.
right now that's what it is 50 feet, and everyone can understand 50 feet.
Except for when the tree branch hits you.
When it's more, then it's when it gets confusing, and that's what has been.
Yep.
Takes
So
place.
that's the policy question, is it may offer equal protection, but it may not be in the interest of the township's residents or body politic to go with just the simple 50 feet for everybody. But as far as due process and equal protection, it would pass that.
Well, and part of the other aspect of this is we're trying not to get involved in litigation for every single decision that goes through this. that is neither in the best interest of the residents, nor is it in the best interest of the township. You know, we understand that the language is unfortunately not probably the best that could have been put in there, but what it's left us with is too much discretion in regards to how a decision is made and how to apply that in each and every situation. It would be nice if we could come up with a formula. I don't know that that's possible. We've tried that on a couple of occasions, and unfortunately, we either got a formula that was too complex for somebody to understand, or that didn't work in every situation. So in either case, it didn't offer the solution that we were seeking when we decided to get into the sightline business. So it pretty much leaves you on the side of either you regulate it or you leave it at 50 feet. And that's what it's been, and that's what it is, and we don't go any further than that. So those are really the two questions that you have, is if you want to stay with 50 feet and call that good and take out the discretion that's in the ordinance right now, that's one methodology. The other one is to be able to define the discretion to the point of not everybody satisfied, but that it makes sense. And you can't use a formula that takes multiple angles and tries to come back, and you need a cosine and a slide rule to come up with an answer for it. So I don't know what's the best idea.
If we're gonna regulate it above and beyond other non-lake properties in the township, I think we go a lake by lake scenario.
Yeah.
Because that's another question with it. Should it be further than just LK1 and the lake areas?
Are we gonna do rivers?
But it's not based on the zoning, it's
Right.
based on the distance to the water,
Yeah,
or, adjacent to water.
adjacent property.
No, just lakes.
If we're talking about views, are we gonna, to try to make it equal and fair, are we gonna include rivers, streams, ponds? I mean, that's,
Yeah.
I think that's a good question.
Where does it end?
What about
We
a golf
can,
course?
then you get something like Rich, where, hey, I've got my,
Yeah, some people have golf course view.
Yes.
Yeah. How about cemeteries? Some people
Yeah.
are into that.
Or I have a view of the lake, and you bought property there, and you're blocking my view of the lake now. Okay, you should have bought that property, I guess.
The only thing we've had these sightline ordinances, what if someone came last year, or this year, and we said, you gotta be 100 feet off the lake because this neighbor's gotta protect his view. And then now we go back to say 50 feet, and then the neighbor buys one there, and they go all the way up to the lake. That's, to me, that's not fair, and we gotta have.
Well, it's like anything else, the sale ended
But-
yesterday.
But it applies when they submit their
Yeah, zoning
application.
regulations change, and that's usually
Yeah.
things that are
Right, but
grandfathered.
yeah, understood.
But like Lake Tyrone, for example, what would be wrong with having a 70-foot minimum offset from the lake in this one? You're only gonna affect 10 properties, and then we already have the existing, we'll have a footnote or whatever for rebuild that existing structure.
and they can go.
There's no reason they need to
get
go
a
50.
variance if they need to. I think that makes sense to take the, would you say, Zach, the 90 percentile of the average?
Yeah, whichever percentile. So you want to make sure that most of the folks would be complying off the bat.
So then the other part of that is if it currently is 50, and if that's all it is, does that, what issues does it create, right? If you look at this lake.
Yeah, but they're
You know
existing
what I-
non-conforming.
That's what I mean. So then if, let's say, I'm just trying to think, so if we said it's 50 and somebody tore their house down and moved it to 50 feet, right? But
that's not a new number, the 50-foot mark isn't.
Well, if you got a house that was, let's say it's 75 and you
Yeah.
want to go to 50, well, once we establish this, you're not gonna be able to, but if you had a house that was at 50 and something happened to it, you could rebuild it, that's what you're saying, you could rebuild it on the existing footprint or in that general area. I think that seems like the best compromise. I mean,
Yeah.
you're never gonna please everyone on this, I couldn't imagine that you could, but I think we gotta try to do the best.
I
we
guess
can.
my harm is my question is, what's the harm in having it be 50? Because that's a clear number that's been in our ordinance for a lot of time.
But
You know,
in addition,
that's-
there was 50 in addition to these other setline rules that were
Yeah,
subjective.
these other ones were
So
in addition
maybe
to
these
50,
people had
yeah.
to be built at 122 because they had to follow the rule.
Highly doubtful,
Or,
because the sightline regulations were put into place until like 2003.
yeah, and these-
Somewhere thereabouts.
Tyrone's a unique lake because there's,
There has been instances where there has been greater ones required.
There have been, but I can tell you based on when I started in 2016, I've seen many, many permits issued without any sightline review.
well, it's
Yeah,
even
I know-
subjective if we need to do the review.
It is.
Right? It's if the planning commission feels.
But then that puts it on staff to identify, well, every single application we're gonna now send to the planning commission before we, process the land use permit application, which slows things down significantly.
But how many has there been where we've required greater setback? Like, I can think of one on Runyon Lake.
Well, as far as the recent ones, I mean, there's certainly determinations that were made that said, well, we're okay with this number. I mean, I guess it is rare that you actually do require something greater, but there are gonna be circumstances that does happen.
Well, and how many places then where this, if we say the setback is now 70, how many people that are within the 50 to 70 are now, in essence, out of compliance, or?
Well, it'd be illegally.
Right, and they'd
Legally
be
minded.
grandfathered in there, but that creates the issue of when they want to sell their house, if somebody wanted to doze it, can they rebuild where they want to at the 50, or do they have to move back to the 70?
Yeah, and that's
Or
kind
what
of
the average is.
my question about,
So
the 50's been in place forever.
yeah, so how many of those houses are you creating?
And I think this study kind of shows that. Change it to 60, how many did you create? 2? Or is it 0?
That's just one particular lake.
I know.
And I did start with the
Easiest lake.
easiest lake.
Yeah.
We get into Runyon Lake, we get into some of the more complicated lakes in terms of the shorelines. That's gonna be a whole other story.
Have you had this talk with the ZBA?
So in the ZBA meetings, that what we have seen in the last year, there's been some that have applied to be closer than 50. But when, like, the latest one I can think of was like Shannon. And the applicant was applying to be closer than 50 feet to the lake because they thought they had to be a certain distance off the road. But the neighbors were at the meeting, they brought up, hey, it'd be better if it was 50 feet like all the other homes. And the applicant had no issues with that. And the 50-foot mark wasn't an issue in that case. It's one application, right? It's not, you can't use that. But from what I've seen, there has been some instances where, hey, there is like a real burden. Their home probably was built before our requirements were in place. But other than that, I don't think there's been any issues with the 50-foot mark.
If I can add to that, just to clarify how the ZBA and the
Yeah.
planning.
Yeah,
commission works
go
on
ahead.
this whole thing. So my understanding of it, I mean, the zoning board of appeals, they're bound by the criteria in the zoning enabling act to grant a variance. If somebody meets all those conditions, then they can't say, no, you can't do that because the planning commission thinks that you need a greater rear yard setback. Doesn't come into play. Procedurally, we try to get the planning commission subcommittee or planning commission input on sight lines prior to the ZBA making their decision on it, but ultimately, they can't use that as a determining factor to say, no, we're gonna deny this variance, if they meet all the other criteria. If that helps at all.
And majority of what we've seen at ZBA recently is side yard variances. Majority of them have been side yard, not lakefront.
So, back to the ZBA, so say it's a lakefront property and you review them all and you say, okay, the planning commission is gonna determine the setback based on footnote X. So then the planning commission determines the setback, well, can they just put a variance in for that setback?
They could, if they meet all the criteria and they put in the ZBA application and pay the fee and go through the
Yes.
process, yeah. The ZBA would override it, is my understanding, and we did talk to the
Yes.
attorney about that at some point to verify, so.
That would be my understanding too.
On the previous one, it was like the planning commission said it, and then the ZBA reviewed that decision?
Well, they shouldn't, I mean,
That was based on.
we
an
give them
appeal.
that information. If it is a sightline thing, then we do provide them with, the subcommittee determined this as far as a reasonable setback. But because their body is bound to this set criteria, when they make a determination,
But the ZBA also, if you appeal something from the planning commission, doesn't the ZBA?
well, that would be a separate thing. That would be a zoning ordinance interpretation.
That one on Brendan?
The latest one, the
What
one
was
on
that?
Running Lake Court.
Bentley.
Well, that one, I don't even remember.
Planning commission set the
Planning
setback,
commission said it, they appealed.
appealed it. and then
They
that
appealed
went-
to the ZBA for setback variances, not the decision made by the planning
Oh.
commission, is my recollection.
An applicant could appeal the decision, but it's a lot harder criteria generally, that there was arbitrary and capricious, that it was something they weren't authorized to do, and it's a very high threshold to appeal, to get a decision appealed, compared to a variance.
Yeah, so I guess
So where do we want to change this?
so.
Would you like to see some sample language for just based on the one lake to do a test fit?
I mean, that.
Yeah.
You can start working
I think
on
it'd be
that.
helpful to see how it turns out, and just something to look at. We're not gonna make a decision tonight, so let's write it up and see where.
Do you want to see that before I go ahead and try to spend time putting together data for additional lakes? Because that will be.
I wouldn't do another lake yet.
Yeah.
Let's see what we get.
Let's just focus on a sample.
Try to
This is a good one to
Figure
sample.
this out, see if it makes sense, or if we go to, and just say, leave it at 50 and.
Yeah, because if it
Well,
is,
the other idea would be, yeah, which
I mean,
is
that would-
the removal of
Next
footnote X.
Removal footnote, leave it at 50, and that would be certainly the most easy. Obviously.
I would caution that the language you'll get would not likely be the stuff that would get inserted exactly here, because your ordinance, you have to be, it's a little more difficult to insert things, just because of how it's structured. So it would be a general concept of this is how the language would look, and then if you think that's good, then we go about the exercise of actually getting it into the
And
document.
then that's in regards to potentially separate setbacks per lake.
Yep.
Will you have that for the, could you have that for the, plan, or for our planning session? Workshop, whatever it is.
I can have very basic language.
Just something, if we could just kind of, when it's still kind of fresh in our mind, if we could look at it briefly next week.
All right.
Do that and then determine if you want him to go further into it for the next regular meeting.
Because we're gonna get into the survey in that next week, right? I mean, what's the plan for?
That's coming up on the agenda.
We'll talk about that.
Oh, it's coming up.
Oh, okay.
I see. There it is, all right.
So Ross, I'm just thinking here, is there someone who, if we remove something from an ordinance, is there someone who would have to review that before we?
It would be an ordinance amendment. So,
proceeded down that path? Like conceptually, would you have someone review it or no?
yeah, I mean, that would be the same process as any zoning ordinance amendment. So you would make a recommendation.
No, my thoughts are like if in some case, if we remove something, would our attorney look at that and say, hey,
That's
what
at,
implications could this have?
that's at your discretion and the board's discretion.
They'd have to have a public hearing.
Yeah. For sure, we'd have to have public, I'm just saying, ordinarily, could we
Yeah.
have someone's thoughts on it?
You absolutely could.
You know, I think that might be a good idea,
Yeah.
because we know we have a few options here, but that way we don't come to some decision and say, oh, well, we gotta wait for this.
Yeah.
We could have already had it. So, yeah. That's all, right now, I don't think we're gonna move on anything on sightlines. Nope. Okay, so we'll close old business item number 2, sightlines. We'll move to calls from the public. Anyone here? Go ahead, Scott.
Right, storage facility, from what I take it, you guys are passing along bylaws, I mean, we didn't go through any bylaws, so you guys are adopting the bylaws that he's provided.
Well, we've asked the township attorney to review.
Okay, so we haven't adopted them yet. You guys didn't ask any questions over the bylaws, I know that. So, and you know, they can be changed by the new association.
Right.
So, you want those to be approved by the township, because if they change something that you don't like, don't have a word. Bylaws, I think you just leave it open for whatever they want to do there. I didn't see here any discussion from anybody questioning what they're, there was more questioning earlier. I mean, Kurt, you asked some questions about somebody could live there. I know their bylaws, just because it doesn't have a sign on the building, doesn't mean they're not going to do business in there. And I'm afraid a lot of, they can set up much stuff there, nobody knows what's going on, I know. But I think you guys, I don't know, it just seems like we're going to have trouble with that place. I mean, as a storage facility, I don't think so. But I think it's too broad what he wants to do there. I just think you guys are leaving it open too much. So, other than that, we've gone too long without having. I've looked at the newspaper the other day, and Argentine's moving right along with their master plan. They write up in the paper, and I'm sure Zach knows about that.
I was in the room.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I think, I don't know what we could do to speed it up, but it just seems like she said, June, no, it's almost July. And I think we've wasted a lot of time. I think we could be further along.
Nate? Right, go ahead.
Number one thing that I'd like to say, Jeanette Ropetta, Fuller Drive. Could you please have the speakers come to the podium instead of talking from the audience? And I'll tell you why. If you've watched your YouTube or your Zoom, people at home not only can't see who's speaking, they can't hear them. So that's why, when people ask me why I'm videotaping, one of the reasons is being that I'm focusing, this is record to keep forever. We have to have people come up here so we can see them and hear them. The microphones at the back of the room hardly work. That's where Mr. Cunningham would like me to live, back there, where you can't hear anything, can't see anything. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to continue to videotape people. One reason being because you guys aren't making them come up to the podium. That's a real simple thing to do. They're here to speak. They should come up to the podium.
Point well taken.
Okay, thank you. And I don't think that's asking a lot. Also, I feel really sad. I feel sad. I try to get involved at the township level, and everybody should, whether it be elections or things that are going on, just in your community. But I'll tell you what, those people that left tonight, older lady, she's sad. She feels like you didn't hear a word that she said. She's lived here for decades. She's concerned about safety. That wasn't addressed. That wasn't answered.
Well,
about the safety?
About the stopping sign distance?
About where do you pull out?
Yeah, it's going to be reviewed by the Livingston County Road Commission who owns the road.
All right. Okay, and that's good. I'm glad that they will review it. But I think you should know that people feel like they're being left out. You wonder why people don't show up for meetings or for workshops or whatever. It's at a standstill. We can't seem to get anything done. The sightlines conversation, from what I know, it's been going on for years. And it just, every time it's, okay, we'll talk about it again. But, okay, the other thing, and my question was partially answered about who polices this as far as the storage unit. The homeowners association is not going to, who's going to police them? I think Scott made a real good point about this is opening up kind of a can of worms. Because this is setting a precedent again. We'll have other mini storage places coming in and wanting to do the same thing, and you're going to have to let them once you set a precedent, I believe. I've been told, we've all been told, that we're the ones that have to police it. So we're going to have to watch the homeowners association, and if they're not reporting what we see going on, then it's down to the residents again, right? You guys don't have the policing power to look after that, or to, so I think it's a can of worms being opened. Also, I'd just like to mention, in case anybody's listening in, and I will announce this and spread it around social media, tomorrow Livingston County Planning Commission will be taking comments regarding the rezoning that is proposed at Foley and Runyon Lake Road. That's the one that you guys talked about at the last Planning Commission meeting. I believe it was the last one, wasn't it? Yeah. So they now take comments from the public. There is a way to attend through Zoom or in person, but I think it's important that people who are concerned about that, again, another precedent being set where it's not what is in our master plan, it's not what the people want, and we need to stand up and say that this is not acceptable. Again, I feel sad. We should be able to come and have you guys hear us and really address the questions, and I feel like the standard, thank you for your comment, and then just go on and check off all the lists and approve this thing without really realizing the impact that it's making in the community and how the people feel about it, and whether or not, like that whole thing about having the, I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought, but having that review done, I'm going to look into that, because I've heard of that before, that you're supposed to have that, what is it called, architectural review?
Architectural committee review.
Yes, yes. It sounds like it's iffy or maybe up to your discretion, but why isn't it being done? Or why does somebody from the community have to bring that up and say, look, you're not following the rules? So again, I just want to say I'm sad. I'm sad because you're not hearing us. You're not hearing our concerns.
Any other public comments? Okay. All right, so the next item is miscellaneous business, which is the next workshop meeting, and which will be, the master plan will be on the agenda for sure. I don't know any other items before we can have maybe an update on the master plan, but if there's any other items, maybe we could bring in sightlines.
Sightlines, master plan is what I have.
So Zach, what do we know on the master plan?
All right, here is my update. Well, first I'm going to start by saying all the maps have been revised, except including areas outside the boundaries is a lot more difficult than I anticipated, because you have boundaries that are in 2 different counties. And where that gets tricky is each county will release their GIS data to folks doing projects for a local government. So we called up Livingston County, we emailed them and said, hey, we're doing the master plan for Tyrone Township, here's the letter from their supervisor to prove we're not just making this up, and they said, here's your file with all the stuff. So we could do similar thing and get for the townships in Livingston County, where it gets real, well, where the difficulty increases is if we go to Genesee County and Oakland County and say, we're doing this master plan stuff, we want your data for free for this local unit of government that's not in your county. That's a challenge. They generally don't like to give stuff away for free. So before we proceeded with that, I wanted to introduce that it significantly increases the degree of difficulty to get that extra information. One thing that we can do, at least for discussion purposes for the process, is I'll call it the hillbilly budget. The zoning maps, for example, from all the other and paste it. So at least as you guys for a landfill, you can have that in your mind. It won't necessarily be here, but it can help about that. This is for the maps. Currently, there have been revised. We're trying as closely as possible. We've got now. We're up. It makes sense to reorganize and have things. The first stab that lands as accurately as. So it's the introduction article, which is relatively mellow. Influences of the different communities around you. We have most of the demographic, the household information updated. Those will be drafted this week within. It will be out Monday. So you have the potential to review all 4 of those articles at the next meeting. And for us to start to think about now, you get to discuss whether or not you workshop session or if you. And our recommendation has been that those visioning sessions we're planning on 4, one for some location in that area or close to that area. The idea is that we want to try to make it easier for folks to attend and intimidating for folks versus if they're going to the local. It can be more welcoming and just easier because it's closer. So start thinking about locations in the 4 different quadrants that we can start contacting. Again, we plan for 4. So one, if you want to start in July, direction wrapped up at our next meeting. My work session would be the 20th, just kind of for. So I have my little timeline here. We are working on gathering some other information for the other articles about the infrastructure and those that I just mentioned. Let's. I wrote stuff on the back here. So that's where we're headed. The survey, we made the edits based on your previous discussion. We got the postcard to the randomized numeric code.
So we're still working on trying to get that out. Reason being, there's been a delay. The board wants to approve the cost for postage. And there's apparently a difference between a standard postcard size versus a slightly larger size. I think the larger size being cheaper because they can run those through a machine, whereas the smaller one they need to do by hand.
Okay.
Like 4,000 different little postcards. So there's been a little bit of a delay with that, but hopefully we'll be.
So the postcards are ready. It's got a QR code. It's got a spot for the alphanumeric code. We've added that question at the front. So give us your code so we know that you actually got this letter from us to do it. The website is ready to go. We didn't they'll want to start populating that with draft articles and draft maps until this body has blessed it. If you want us to do it the other way, we can start putting stuff up there as soon as we're done with them, but generally we want to make sure that you're happy with what's presented first. Let's see. That's it for the master plan right now. I will say, process-wise, there is no right or wrong way to do it. Well, there are some wrong ways to do it if you violate the Planning and Enabling Act. You can have a separate steering committee with all sorts of different folks and interest groups that are involved. In this case, Tyrone Township has decided to have the Planning Commission do it. The advantage that you guys are tuned into the planning and zoning issues more than folks who may not be. The disadvantage is you're a public body, so whenever you meet, it's kind of a big deal. Versus if you just had a steering committee, a more formal organization, it's easier to meet because you don't have necessarily the full Open Meetings Act. So there are advantages and disadvantages for either course. A lot yet, but the amount of public input that you have designed into your process right now, their planning commission was a steering committee, and no visioning sessions, that people could come in and they did the best fit is for you guys. What I would say for the members of the comments they have about, so that you guys can have that as part of your discussions as you're reviewing text, or if you want specific, want to see heavy industry here, to let me know. It is informal interaction between planning commission and public, just because of how, and a lot of the visioning sessions where we'll break into small groups and focus on specific topics in community wire in that little area. That's all that I have.
Thanks, Ed. That's good. Thanks, Ross. Good update. Anything else on the master plan or next workshop? Yes.
I will not be at the next workshop.
Thanks, Kurt. All righty. It will be next Wednesday at 6. I think that's it, guys. Let's see if something else. That's good. Good meeting.
Move to adjourn.
All righty.
I think I passed my application.
So guys, that still doesn't give us. There's nothing. Well, the visioning sessions are for everyone. We were told by the supervisor and planning commission for 16 months that we're going to be needed. Something a certain way, we're willing to